Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight we'll drift into the ancient landscapes of Mexico, where deserts bloom with impossible colors and mountains hold clouds in their stone embrace. Mexico is more than a bridge between continents. It is where tectonic plates whisper their ancient stories, where limestone dissolves into underground cathedrals, where two oceans meet but never mix. This land breathes through 10,000 cenotes, dreams in the shadows of sleeping volcanoes, and remembers everything in layers of rock and coral. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. Deep beneath the Chihuahuan Desert in Nica, there exists a cave where geology becomes architecture, where time crystallizes into monuments. The Cave of Crystals harbors selenite formations that defy comprehension, translucent beams stretching 39 feet long, some weighing as much as 10 elephants. These crystals grew in conditions that would kill most life. Temperatures reaching 136 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity so complete that the air itself becomes almost liquid. For 500,000 years, they've been growing in this underground cathedral, adding perhaps a width of human hair every century. The cave remained flooded until miners pumped it dry in the year 2000, revealing a landscape that seems borrowed from another planet. Scientists who enter wear cooling suits and can only remain for 45 minutes before the heat overwhelms even their protective equipment. When the pumping eventually stops, water will reclaim this crystal palace, and the slow process of growth will resume in darkness, adding millimeter by millimeter to formations that have already outlasted empires. 300 miles northwest, the Gran Desierto de Altar holds a different kind of wonder. Here, star dunes rise 650 feet into the Sonoran sky, their perfect pyramidal shapes created by winds that blow from multiple directions. These dunes possess a voice. When conditions align perfectly, when the wind moves their quartz grains at just the right angle, they sing. It's a low humming that travels across the desert, a sound somewhere between a cello's lowest note and distant thunder. The sand here migrates constantly, yet the dunes themselves remain, rebuilding their shapes season after season. Some of these formations are 10,000 years old, their cores containing sand grains that have been tumbling across this desert since the last ice age. At night, when temperatures drop 40 degrees from the day's heat, the sand contracts, creating tiny avalanches that whisper down the slopes. The local Tohono O'odham people have known about the singing sands for generations, incorporating their voices into stories about the desert's dreams. Below the jungle floor of the Yucatan Peninsula stretches the world's largest underwater cave system, a labyrinth of flooded passages that extends for 215 miles through the Sac-Acton network. These caves connect ancient Maya ceremonial sites through tunnels that have been submerged for thousands of years. Divers exploring these passages move through water so clear it seems like flying, past stalactites that formed when these caves were dry during the last ice age. The water maintains a constant 77 degrees, filtered through limestone until it achieves an almost supernatural clarity. In some chambers, haloclines create visible rivers within the cave, layers where salt and fresh water meet but don't mix, appearing like underwater mirages. Archaeological treasures lie scattered throughout: pottery shards, human remains from ritual sacrifices, the bones of giant ground sloths that fell through ceiling holes 10,000 years ago. The Maya called these flooded caves Xibalba, the underworld, and built their greatest cities near the cenotes that provided access to this hidden realm. The Yucatan Peninsula bears a cosmic scar that changed life on Earth. The ring of cenotes traces a perfect circle 112 miles in diameter, marking the rim of the Chicxulub crater, where an asteroid struck 66 million years ago. This impact released energy equivalent to 10 billion Hiroshima bombs, vaporizing limestone and sending debris into orbit that would rain down as molten glass across the planet. Today, this ancient wound manifests as a necklace of sinkholes, each one a window into the underground river system created by the crater's fractured limestone rim. The cenotes follow the crater's edge with eerie precision, their placement determined by an event that ended the age of dinosaurs. Some of these sinkholes plunge 300 feet straight down, their walls bearing fossil evidence of the catastrophe. Layers of impact debris sandwiched between limestone that formed in calm seas before and after the event. Swimming in these cenotes means floating above the exact boundary where one geological era ended and another began, in water filtered through rocks that witnessed the planet's most dramatic transformation. In Chiapas, the Sumidero Canyon drops more than half a mile deep through limestone walls that read like a geological textbook. 136 million years of Earth's history stands exposed in these cliffs, layer by layer, epoch by epoch. The Grijalva River carved this monument to time, patient water wearing through stone that formed when this land lay beneath a shallow sea. Along the canyon walls, one particular formation captures the imagination: the Christmas Tree Waterfall, where mineral-rich springs cascade over moss-covered rocks that have grown into the perfect shape of evergreen trees. These formations build slowly, each year adding microscopic layers of calcium carbonate that eventually create these living sculptures. In the depths of the canyon, the river maintains pools of jade-green water, colored by dissolved limestone and microscopic algae. Spider monkeys move through the trees that cling to the cliff faces, their ancestors having lived in this canyon for thousands of generations. When morning mist fills the canyon, it becomes a river of clouds flowing between walls that existed before flowers evolved, before birds learned to fly. Far out in the Pacific, 240 miles southwest of Cabo San Lucas, the Revillagigedo Islands rise from abyssal depths as the peaks of underwater mountains. These volcanic islands emerge from ocean depths of nearly 12,000 feet, their summits creating their own weather in the vast blue of the Pacific. Clouds form around their peaks even when the surrounding ocean stretches clear to every horizon, generated by moist air rising and cooling against volcanic slopes. The islands exist in such isolation that they've developed unique species found nowhere else: birds, reptiles, and plants that evolved in separation from their mainland ancestors. The underwater slopes of these volcanic peaks host massive aggregations of manta rays, hammerhead sharks gathering in schools of hundreds, drawn by underwater currents that the islands deflect upward, bringing nutrients from the deep ocean. Navy sonar has detected underwater volcanic vents still releasing heat, suggesting these islands continue to grow, adding new rock to foundations that began forming 10 million years ago. Lake Chapala, Mexico's largest freshwater lake, breathes with the seasons like a living thing. During the rainy months, it spreads across 420 square miles, submerging entire islands that emerge again during the dry season like temporary continents. This rhythmic flooding and drying has created a unique ecosystem where fish have adapted to radical changes in their environment. Some years, the lake shrinks so dramatically that fishermen can walk to spots where they once needed boats. Other years, it swells beyond its usual boundaries, flooding lakeside towns that have learned to build with this possibility in mind. The lake's depth varies from just a few feet to 30 feet, creating temperature layers that fish navigate like underwater weather systems. Beneath its waters lie the remains of ancient settlements, revealed during extreme droughts when water levels drop to historic lows. The lake acts as a natural thermostat for the region, moderating temperatures and creating morning mists that drift across the water like ghost ships. The Copper Canyon system in Chihuahua represents not one but 6 distinct canyons, together covering 25,000 square miles of broken landscape. Eureka Canyon, the deepest, plunges more than 6,000 feet, deeper than the Grand Canyon, though its green-clothed walls make it seem gentler than its Arizona cousin. These canyons formed through a combination of volcanic activity and river erosion, creating a maze of gorges that the Tarahumara people have called home for centuries. The temperature difference between rim and bottom can exceed 40 degrees, creating distinct ecological zones stacked like layer cakes. At the bottom grow tropical fruits, bananas, oranges, mangoes, while the rim supports pine forests that wouldn't seem out of place in Canada. Rivers at the canyon bottom run warm enough for swimming year-round, heated by their journey through sun-baked rock. The canyon walls reveal frozen volcanic flows, some containing gas bubbles that formed as the lava cooled, creating rock that looks like Swiss cheese turned to stone. 15 miles from the main Copper Canyon, the village of Karokahui sits in a geographical anomaly, where 3 different climate zones converge within a 2-mile radius. Walking from the village center, you can move from alpine forest through oak woodlands to tropical valley in the span of an afternoon hike. This compression of ecosystems occurs because of the dramatic elevation changes and the way canyon walls channel moisture and trap heat. Apple trees grow within sight of banana plants, and snow can dust the upper elevations while tropical birds sing in the valley below. The local mission, built 400 years ago, sits precisely at the convergence point, its builders having recognized this spot as somehow special. Morning fog often fills the valley while sunshine lights the peaks, creating a landscape of islands floating in clouds. The biodiversity in this small area exceeds that of entire states, with species from different climates finding narrow bands of suitable habitat stacked vertically like apartments in a biological high-rise. Pico de Orizaba rises from Mexico's volcanic belt as the country's highest point, its summit reaching 18,491 feet into air so thin that climbers must rest every few steps. This dormant volcano last erupted in 1687, though it still releases occasional puffs of sulfurous gas from fumaroles near its crater. What makes Orizaba remarkable beyond its height is the glacier clinging to its upper slopes, Gran Glaciar Norte, North America's largest tropical glacier. This river of ice exists because of Orizaba's elevation, which lifts it above the freezing level even at tropical latitude. The glacier has been retreating for decades, leaving behind polished rock and moraines that tell the story of ice ages when glaciers extended much farther down the mountain. From Orizaba's summit on clear days, both the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean are visible, making it one of the few places on Earth where you can see 2 oceans from a single point. The mountain creates its own weather systems, forcing moisture-laden air from the Gulf upward until it releases rain and snow that feed rivers flowing to both coasts. In the Lacandan jungle of Chiapas, 120 inches of rain fall each year, creating a canopy so dense that only 2% of sunlight reaches the forest floor. This near darkness has created a world of specialized life forms that exist in perpetual twilight, Fungi glow with bioluminescence, creating patches of green light in the darkness. Trees have evolved buttress roots that spread like wooden walls, supporting massive trunks in the thin jungle soil. Hidden within this green darkness lie the ruins of ancient Maya cities, their pyramids and palaces slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Yaxchilan, Bonampak, and dozens of unnamed sites disappear under vegetation that grows with tropical enthusiasm. The jungle sounds never cease: howler monkeys whose calls carry for miles, the constant drip of water from leaf to leaf, the crack of falling branches weighted down by epiphytes. Some trees here are over 1,000 years old, their crowns emerging above the canopy into sunshine their lower branches have never known. Jaguars still hunt these forests, padding silently through green shadows. 600 miles north of the tropical Lacandon, the Chihuahuan Desert sprawls across 175,000 square miles. Yet hidden within this apparent desolation lies the Cuatro Ciénegas Basin, an aquatic anomaly that shouldn't exist. Here, 300 natural pools persist in the desert, fed by deep aquifer springs that have flowed for millions of years. These pools host stromatolites, layered structures built by cyanobacteria that represent one of Earth's earliest life forms. The stromatolites here photosynthesize using methods unchanged for 3 billion years, producing oxygen the same way Earth's first photosynthetic organisms did when the planet's atmosphere contained no free oxygen. The water in these pools contains unusual chemistry, extremely low phosphorus levels that have created unique evolutionary pressures. Scientists have discovered more endemic species here than in the Galapagos Islands, including fish that have evolved in isolation for millions of years. Each pool has slightly different mineral content, creating microenvironments where evolution has run independent experiments. Some pools are warm from deep thermal sources, others cold from mountain aquifers, creating a desert archipelago of aquatic islands. Near Cancun, beneath 28 feet of Caribbean water, an unusual museum takes shape. Musa, the underwater museum of art, consists of 500 life-sized human sculptures anchored to the seafloor. These figures, cast from local residents, stand in silent congregation on the sandy bottom, their concrete forms designed to promote coral growth. Each year, these sculptures gain 200 kilograms of new living coral, transforming from gray concrete to vibrant reef. Fish swim through the gaps between figures, sea fans grow from outstretched hands, and brain coral crowns heads like thoughts made visible. The sculptures change with each season as different organisms colonize their surfaces. First algae, then fire coral, eventually staghorn and elkhorn, corals that will completely obscure the human forms beneath. The museum serves a dual purpose, drawing divers away from natural reefs while creating new habitat for marine life. At night, when phosphorescent plankton bloom, the statues glow with blue-green light, becoming ghostly figures in an underwater cathedral. In Oaxaca, the mineral springs of Hierve el Agua have created something that seems impossible. Petrified waterfalls, stone cascades frozen in the act of falling. These formations built up over thousands of years as mineral-laden water emerged from the mountainside and evaporated, leaving behind calcium carbonate deposits that accumulated like cave formations in reverse. The waterfalls drop 160 feet down cliff faces, their surfaces rippled and flowing despite being solid rock. The springs still flow today, continuing the slow process of building these stone waterfalls grain by grain. The water emerges at exactly the right temperature and mineral content to precipitate its dissolved limestone, creating natural infinity pools at the cliff's edge where ancient peoples once bathed. From a distance, these formations look so much like frozen water that visitors often refuse to believe they're stone until they touch them. Similar formations exist in only one other place on Earth, Pamukkale in Turkey, making these stone waterfalls among the planet's rarest geological phenomena. The monarch butterfly biosphere reserve spans 217 square miles across the mountains of Michoacán and Estado de Mexico, where 14 peaks create precisely the microclimate needed by 1 billion butterflies that arrive each winter. These insects fly up to 3,000 miles from Canada, navigating by mechanisms still not fully understood, to reach the same Oyamel fir forests their great-great-grandparents left the previous spring. The butterflies cluster so densely that tree branches bend under their weight, creating living draperies of orange and black wings. The temperature at these elevations, between 9,800 and 11,000 feet, stays cool enough to slow the butterfly's metabolism, but warm enough to prevent freezing, allowing them to survive winter in a state of semi-dormancy. On warm afternoons, millions take flight simultaneously, filling the air with the sound of wings that resembles a gentle rain. The forest floor becomes carpeted with butterflies that have completed their life cycle, their bodies enriching soil that feeds the trees that will shelter future generations. Mexico City sits atop one of geology's cruel jokes, a drained lake bed of clay that compresses unevenly, causing buildings to sink and tilt at different rates. The Metropolitan Cathedral has sunk 31 feet since 1573, its massive weight squeezing water from clay laid down when Lake Texcoco covered this valley. Different parts of the cathedral sink at different speeds, requiring an endless battle against gravity using hydraulic jacks and injected concrete. The ancient lake bed consists of layers of volcanic ash and clay up to 300 feet thick, creating a foundation like a waterbed made of mud. Some areas of the city sink 16 inches per year, creating a rolling landscape where subway lines that were built level now undulate like roller coasters. The original island where the Aztecs built Tenochtitlan sits slightly higher, its firmer foundation creating a subtle hill in what was once absolutely flat lake bottom. When it rains heavily, the ghost of Lake Texcoco returns, flooding neighborhoods that sit below the level of the city's drainage system. The Pinacate Biosphere Reserve in Sonora resembles the moon so closely that NASA sent astronauts here to train for lunar missions. 400 volcanic cones punctuate the landscape, along with 9 massive craters called Mars, formed by explosive interactions between magma and groundwater. El Elegante crater stretches 4,000 feet across and plunges 460 feet deep, its walls revealing layers of volcanic ash and lava flows, like a geological layer cake. The volcanic field remains geologically active, though the most recent eruption occurred about 11,000 years ago, yesterday in geological time. The black basalt absorbs so much heat that summer ground temperatures exceed 160 degrees Fahrenheit, creating shimmering mirages that make distant mountains appear to float. Desert-adapted plants grow directly from lava flows, their roots finding cracks where moisture collects. After rare rainstorms, the crater bottoms become temporary lakes that evaporate within days, leaving behind patterns of dried mud that crack into perfect geometric polygons. In Quintana Roo, Bacalar Lagoon stretches 26 miles long, but averages only 3 feet deep, creating a body of water that displays 7 distinct shades of blue. These color variations come from changes in depth, the white sand bottom, and varying concentrations of minerals and microorganisms. The shallow depth means the entire lagoon warms to bathtub temperature in summer, while winter cold fronts can chill it completely within hours. The lagoon formed in a depression created by multiple geological faults its isolation from the ocean allowing unique evolution of its organisms. Stromatolites grow here too, building reef-like structures in the shallow water, their photosynthetic bacteria creating oxygen bubbles that rise like natural champagne. The water clarity allows sunlight to reach the bottom everywhere, creating an underwater meadow of aquatic plants that wave in currents too gentle to feel. Pirates once used this lagoon as a hideout, its multiple channels and shallow depth making it impossible for larger naval vessels to pursue them. The Sierra Gorda in Querétaro compresses an entire continent's worth of ecosystems into 60 miles of elevation change. Starting in desert scrubland at 650 feet, the mountains rise through 7 distinct vegetation zones to cloud forest at 9,800 feet. Each zone hosts different species, creating biological islands stacked vertically. The transition between zones can be startlingly abrupt. Within 100 feet of elevation, organ pipe cacti give way to oak trees, or pine forest transforms into cloud forest, perpetually shrouded in mist. This compression occurs because the Sierra Gorda sits at the intersection of 2 major biological regions, the Nearctic and Neotropical, creating a mixing zone where North American species meet tropical ones. Black bears descend from pine forests to feed on prickly pear cactus fruits, while tropical parrots nest in temperate zone oak trees. The mountains generate their own rainfall as Pacific moisture rises and cools against their western slopes, creating a water cycle that sustains ecosystems that shouldn't exist this far north. Near Tulum, Cenote Angelita holds one of nature's most surreal phenomena, an underwater river flowing at 100 feet beneath the surface. This river exists where fresh and salt water meet but refuse to mix, creating a distinct layer of hydrogen sulfide that appears like a misty stream flowing through the depths. Divers descending through the clear fresh water suddenly encounter this ghostly river, complete with fallen trees and debris along its banks, their branches appearing to sway in an underwater current. The hydrogen sulfide layer, created by decomposing organic matter, looks like thick fog rolling through a submerged valley. Below this river lies salt water from ancient ocean intrusions, denser and darker than the fresh water above. The effect creates 3 distinct worlds in one cenote: the sunlit freshwater realm, the twilight river of mist, and the eternal darkness of the salt water beneath. Cave divers describe the sensation of swimming through this underwater river as passing between dimensions, where the rules of physics seem temporarily suspended. Tree trunks that fell into the cenote centuries ago remain perfectly preserved in the hydrogen sulfide layer, creating an underwater forest frozen in time. The Mezquital Valley in Hidalgo demonstrates humanity's strange alchemy, transforming wasteland into farmland through an unlikely source. For over a century, Mexico City's wastewater has flowed here, converting 200 square miles of former desert into productive agricultural land. What was once barren ground now grows alfalfa, corn, and beans, the soil enriched by the organic matter in the treated water. This transformation hasn't come without complexity. The valley has become a massive natural treatment plant where soil bacteria process urban waste into agricultural nutrients. The irrigation channels create their own ecosystems, supporting bird populations that never existed here before the water arrived. Farmers have learned to read the water's quality by its color and smell, adjusting their planting schedules to the rhythms of the distant city's water use. During the dry season, when rain might not fall for months, these fields remain green while the surrounding desert browns and withers. The valley has become an accidental wetland, with artificial lakes forming where irrigation water collects, creating habitat for migrating birds. that now depend on this engineered oasis. Nevado de Colima rises 14,000 feet into tropical skies at latitude 19 degrees north, generating its own snow through sheer elevation. This dormant volcano creates a climate island where winter exists year-round above 13,000 feet, despite sitting at the same latitude as Hawaii. The mountain's summit accumulates snow that would seem impossible at this tropical position, the white cap visible from the Pacific coast on clear days like a mistake in the landscape. Just 3 miles away, its sibling Volcán de Colima steams continuously, one of Mexico's most active volcanoes, creating a landscape where ice and fire exist in permanent conversation. The temperature gradient on Nevado de Colima is so extreme that climbers can begin their ascent in tropical heat and end in Arctic conditions within 6 hours. The mountain creates weather for hundreds of miles around, forcing Pacific moisture upward until it falls as snow on peaks where no snow should exist. Pine forests grow on its slopes alongside tropical species, creating biological confusion where temperate and tropical zones overlap. Ancient glaciers carved valleys into the volcano's flanks, leaving behind cirques and moraines that tell of ice ages when this tropical mountain wore glaciers like armor. The Usumacinta River forms 120 miles of border with Guatemala, carrying more water than any other Mexican river while hiding entire Maya cities beneath its brown waters. This river moves with deceptive calm, but its volume exceeds all other Mexican rivers combined, draining rainfall from the Petén rainforest and Chiapas highlands. During floods, it spreads miles beyond its banks, revealing stone monuments and pyramids that normally lie submerged. Archaeologists using sonar have detected massive structures beneath the water, palaces, pyramids, entire plaza complexes that the river claimed centuries ago when it changed course. The river's sediment load is so heavy that it's actively building new land where it meets the Gulf, extending the coastline seaward by several feet each year. Ancient Maya trade routes followed this river, their canoes carrying jade, obsidian, and cacao between highland and lowland cities. Today, howler monkeys call across the water from trees that lean over the current, their voices carrying for miles in the humid air. The river changes color with the seasons, green during low water, brown during floods, occasionally red when it carries iron-rich soil from the highlands. Isla Espiritu Santo near La Paz covers just 31 square miles but contains 36 distinct beaches, each nestled in its own cove, shaped by unique combinations of wind, wave, and volcanic rock. The island formed from ancient lava flows that created a coastline of endless variations: black rock cliffs, red sandstone arches, white coral sand beaches, each in their protected bay. Sea lions colonize the rocky points, their colonies positioned to catch morning sun while avoiding afternoon heat. The island's volcanic origins created numerous sea caves where blue light filters through underwater openings, illuminating chambers that flood and drain with each tide. Despite its desert appearance, the island supports surprising diversity. Endemic black jackrabbits, ring-tailed cats, and reptiles found nowhere else on Earth. Each beach faces a different direction, ensuring that no matter the wind direction, calm water can always be found somewhere. The surrounding waters shift from turquoise to deep blue to emerald depending on depth and bottom composition, creating a palette of blues that changes hourly with the sun's angle. Frigate birds nest on the island's heights, their throat pouches inflating like red balloons during mating displays visible from miles away. In the Chihuahuan Desert, the Bolsón de Mapimí creates a zone where the ordinary rules of physics seem to bend. Radio signals disappear here, compasses spin aimlessly, and some claim that meteorites fall with unusual frequency, earning it the name Zone of Silence. This 40-square-mile area sits at the same latitude as the Bermuda Triangle and the Egyptian pyramids, leading to elaborate theories about magnetic anomalies and energy vortexes. The scientific explanation involves underground mineral deposits that interfere with radio waves and magnetic fields, though this hasn't stopped the proliferation of mysteries. The basin formed as an ancient seabed, its floor covered with marine fossils from when this desert lay beneath Jurassic waves. Unusual genetic mutations appear in the local flora and fauna. Purple-tinged cacti, desert tortoises with triangular shell patterns found nowhere else. After rare rainstorms, the basin floor becomes a temporary lake that reflects the sky so perfectly that the horizon disappears. The silence here is absolute. No insect noise, no bird calls, just the occasional whisper of wind moving sand grains across fossil seashells from an ocean that dried up 100 million years ago. Lake Pátzcuaro in Michoacán sits cradled at 6,700 feet elevation, its waters reflecting the volcanic peaks that surround it like a mirror held to the sky. The lake contains 5 islands, each with its own character. Janitzio, rising cone-shaped from the center, Pacanda stretching long and narrow, Unuan covered in ancient forests. The Purepecha people have fished these waters for over 1,000 years, using butterfly nets, delicate constructions of wood and thread that they still deploy today, more for tradition than efficiency. These nets, shaped like butterfly wings, dip and rise in choreographed movements that look more like dance than fishing. The lake's high elevation means its waters never warm beyond comfortable, maintaining temperatures that feel perpetually autumnal. During Day of the Dead celebrations, thousands of candles float on small boats, turning the lake into a constellation of lights that mirrors the stars above. The lake breathes with mysterious seiches, standing waves that slosh from shore to shore without any apparent cause, as if the lake itself were gently rocking in its mountain cradle. Fish species here exist nowhere else, having evolved in isolation since the lake formed in a volcanic caldera. The Sierra de San Francisco in Baja California Sur guards cave paintings that stretch 30 feet tall on cliff faces 1,600 feet above current sea level. These murals, painted over 7,000 years ago, depict humans and animals in reds, blacks, whites, and yellows that remain vivid despite millennia of exposure. The painters, known only as the Cochimese ancestors, somehow scaled these cliff faces to create art visible only from specific vantage points across the canyon. The paintings show creatures that no longer exist here: deer, rabbits, mountain lions, suggesting a time when this desert was grassland. Some figures appear half human, half animal, frozen in shamanic transformation. The pigments bonded with the rock through some unknown process that has preserved them better than many medieval European frescoes. Reaching these galleries requires days of travel through roadless desert, following the same narrow paths the artists must have used. The scale suggests these weren't casual decorations, but monumental works requiring scaffolding, planning, and purpose we can only guess at. Local ranchers speak of paintings in unexplored canyons, galleries that might contain messages from civilizations that vanished before the pyramids were built. Near Playa del Carmen, Rio Secreto winds 8 miles through underground passages adorned with geological jewelry. Millions of stalactites and stalagmites crowd these flooded caves, some dating back 2.5 million years, each one built drop by precious drop. The river maintains a constant 77 degrees, its crystal clear water revealing formations that look like frozen waterfalls, draped curtains, and pipe organs made of stone. Some chambers open into cathedral-like spaces where voices echo for 10 seconds. Others squeeze so tight that explorers must remove their tanks to pass through. The formations continue growing, each stalactite adding perhaps a cubic inch per century, patient construction that makes human architecture seem hasty. In certain chambers, the ceiling has collapsed, creating natural skylights where jungle trees send roots down 60 feet to reach the water, their root systems hanging like organic chandeliers. The silence in these caves is so complete that visitors can hear their own heartbeats, the sound of blood moving through vessels becoming audible in the absence of any other noise. Ancient Maya pottery fragments rest on underwater ledges, placed there when these caves were dry during ceremonies lost to time. The Trans-Mexican volcanic belt stretches 600 miles from the Pacific to the Gulf, a chain of fire that created the central Mexican plateau. This belt contains 48 volcanoes that have shaped the country's geography, economy, and mythology. Some sleep peacefully, their craters holding lakes or forests. Others steam and rumble, reminding everyone that the Earth's molten heart beats just miles beneath the surface. This volcanic chain exists because the Cocos Plate slides beneath the North American plate, melting as it descends into Earth's mantle. The magma rises through weaknesses in the crust, building these monuments to geological violence. The volcanic soil, rich in minerals, supports most of Mexico's agriculture and largest cities. Mexico City, Guadalajara, Puebla, all exist because volcanic eruptions created flat, fertile valleys between peaks. The belt continues to evolve. GPS measurements show the mountains rising and shifting by millimeters each year. Some volcanoes here are so young in geological terms that human witnesses recorded their birth. Others are so ancient, their original shapes have eroded beyond recognition, leaving only volcanic necks standing like stone fingers pointing at the sky. Cenote dos Ojos near Tulum connects two circular sinkholes through 42 miles of surveyed passages, creating one of the world's most extensive underwater cave systems. The name, Two Eyes, comes from the twin circular openings that peer up from the jungle floor, like the earth looking back at those who peer into its depths. Divers have explored passages that extend 390 feet deep, finding chambers large enough to hold commercial airliners. The water maintains such clarity that beams of sunlight penetrate deep into the system, creating underwater light shows as they filter through the clear water. In some passages, haloclines create visible layers where salt and fresh water meet, appearing like underwater mirages that distort vision. The cave system contains evidence of dramatic sea level changes, stalactites that formed in air when sea levels were lower, now hanging like chandeliers in flooded chambers. Fossilized shells embedded in the ceiling speak of times when the ocean reached much farther inland. The deepest passages remain unexplored, their depths holding secrets about the peninsula's geological history and possibly connecting to other cenote systems in a vast underground network. The Mesoamerican Reef touches 450 miles of Mexican Caribbean coast, the second largest barrier reef in the world after Australia's Great Barrier Reef. This living wall of coral hosts 65 species of stony coral and serves as nursery and shelter for hundreds of fish species. The reef began forming after the last ice age when sea levels rose and flooded the continental shelf, providing the shallow, warm waters coral polyps need. Each coral head represents thousands of years of growth, tiny polyps adding their skeletons to structures their ancestors began. Hurricane waves that would destroy coastal development barely disturb the reef, which has evolved to flex and bend with storm surges. The reef creates its own weather, warming shallow waters that generate afternoon thunderstorms. At night, the reef transforms as nocturnal species emerge. octopi hunting crabs, moray eels leaving their crevices, bioluminescent plankton creating trails of blue light. The reef is actually multiple reefs: barrier reefs, fringing reefs, patch reefs, and atolls, each with distinct characteristics. Parts of the reef are dying from warming waters and pollution, while other sections thrive, creating a patchwork of death and rebirth visible from space. Monte Alban in Oaxaca represents one of humanity's most ambitious earthworks, an entire mountaintop removed to create a ceremonial center. 2,500 years ago, the Zapotecs leveled this peak 6,400 feet above sea level, creating a plaza covering 20 hectares. They moved an estimated volume of earth equivalent to 40 Egyptian pyramids, using only stone tools and human labor. The flattened summit offers 360-degree views of surrounding valleys, a strategic position that controlled trade routes for 1,000 years. The plaza's drainage system still functions, channeling rainwater through carved stone conduits older than Rome. Tombs beneath the plaza contained jade masks, gold jewelry, and ceramic urns that speak of wealth generated by controlling valley agriculture. The site's abandonment around 900 CE remains mysterious. No evidence of warfare, disease, or natural disaster, just empty palaces and silent pyramids. Today, clouds often engulf the mountaintop, creating the sensation of a city floating in the sky. The acoustic properties of the plaza allow normal conversation to be heard clearly hundreds of feet away, an engineering feat that modern architects struggle to explain. The Colorado River Delta in Baja California once covered 3,000 square miles of wetlands where the river met the Sea of Cortez, supporting jaguars, abundant bird life, and indigenous communities. Now the river rarely reaches the sea, its water diverted by dams and irrigation upstream, leaving vast salt flats where marshes once thrived. These salt flats stretch to the horizon, their surfaces cracked into polygons that look like dried dragon skin. After exceptional wet years, when water briefly returns, the desert explodes with dormant seeds that have waited decades for moisture. Pelicans arrive within days, somehow knowing that temporary pools miles from the ocean contain fish. The indigenous Kukapa people speak of the river's voice, now silent, that once announced spring floods with a roar audible for miles. The delta's soils contain so much salt from centuries of evaporation that they glitter in moonlight like snow. Yet life persists. Desert pupfish survive in water saltier than the ocean. Burrowing owls nest in abandoned irrigation pipes, and rare vaquita porpoises hunt in the murky waters where river sediments once met the sea. Laguna de Terminos in Campeche spreads across 695 square miles as Mexico's largest coastal lagoon, where rivers meet the Gulf in a vast nursery for marine life. This shallow lagoon averages just 10 feet deep, creating sun-warmed waters where juvenile fish, shrimp, and crabs find shelter among mangrove roots. 3 major rivers feed the lagoon, their fresh water mixing with Gulf salt water to create gradients of salinity that different species exploit. During the rainy season, the lagoon can become almost entirely fresh, while winter northerlies push salt water deep into the system. This constant change supports extraordinary diversity. 140 fish species use the lagoon at some point in their life cycle. Manatees graze underwater meadows of seagrass, their massive bodies surprisingly graceful in the shallow water. Pink dolphins, found nowhere else in the Gulf, hunt in the lagoon's murky waters using echolocation. Mayan traders once crossed this lagoon in canoes laden with goods, following channels that remain navigable today. Oil platforms dot the horizon, extracting petroleum from deposits formed when this lagoon was a prehistoric sea, its organisms compressed into black gold over millions of years. The Cave of Swallows in San Luis Potosi plunges 1,220 feet straight down, creating an abyss large enough to swallow the Empire State Building with room to spare. This sotano, or pit cave, formed when groundwater dissolved limestone until the ceiling of an enormous underground chamber collapsed, leaving a nearly perfect circular opening. Each dawn and dusk, millions of white-collared swifts and green parakeets tornado in and out of the cave, their wings creating a sound like a waterfall. The birds spiral to avoid collisions, creating a living vortex that can last 30 minutes as they exit each morning. The cave bottom covers several acres, supporting its own ecosystem in permanent twilight. Ferns grow in the dim light that filters down, while blind insects have evolved in the deeper recesses. Base jumpers consider this the ultimate challenge, free-falling for 10 seconds before opening parachutes in the underground chamber. The cave walls show the geological history of the region: layers of limestone from ancient seas, darker bands of mud from prehistoric floods, fossils of creatures that lived when this was ocean floor. Paricutin volcano in Michoacan began as a crack in Dionisio Pulido's cornfield on February 20th, 1943. Within 24 hours, the fissure had built a cone 50 feet tall. Within a year, the volcano reached 1,391 feet, burying the villages of Paricutin and San Juan Parangaricutiro beneath lava and ash. The volcano's birth was witnessed and documented in detail, providing science with the only complete record of a volcano's life from birth to extinction. For 9 years, it erupted continuously, building a cone of cinders and ash while lava flows created a landscape that looks like black ocean waves frozen in stone. Then, as suddenly as it began, Paricutin fell silent in 1952, leaving a monument to Earth's unpredictability. The church tower of San Juan still emerges from the lava field, its bells buried in rock that was liquid 70 years ago. The ash enriched surrounding soils, creating some of Mexico's most productive avocado orchards. Local Purepecha people had legends of fire gods sleeping beneath their fields, stories dismissed as mythology until the earth split open and proved them right. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec narrows Mexico to just 137 miles between oceans, creating a wind tunnel that shapes life for hundreds of miles. When high pressure builds in the Gulf and low pressure dominates the Pacific, Arctic air funnels through this gap at speeds reaching 60 miles per hour. These Tehuano winds can blow continuously for days, bending trees permanently southward, sandblasting paint from buildings, generating waves in the Pacific that surfers track from satellites. The winds sculpt sand dunes that migrate across the landscape, burying and revealing archaeological sites in predictable cycles. This narrow land bridge has been proposed for canals, railways, and highways to rival Panama, but the winds make construction and maintenance a constant battle. The indigenous Zapotec and Huav peoples built their houses low and strong, understanding what engineers learn through expensive failures. During the strongest wind events, the Pacific Ocean turns emerald green as nutrients rise from the depths, triggering plankton blooms that feed sardine populations that arrive with Swiss timing. The wind shapes culture too. Women here traditionally wear elaborate headdresses that won't blow away, and local music incorporates the wind's howl as a natural instrument. Xochimilco's floating gardens in Mexico City preserve 300 miles of canals and chinampas, artificial islands built by the Aztecs 900 years ago. These gardens float on lakes that no longer exist, maintained by constant dredging and repair in what remains of the Valley of Mexico's vast wetlands. The chinampas were created by weaving reeds into rafts, covering them with lake mud, and anchoring them with willow trees whose roots eventually bound everything together. This system could produce 7 harvests per year, feeding the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan when it was larger than any European city. Today, farmers still work these plots, poling flat-bottomed boats through channels barely wider than their vessels. The water maintains a constant temperature that extends growing seasons, while the rich mud requires no fertilizer. Axolotls, the salamanders that never grow up, survive only here and in a few laboratory tanks, their wild population reduced to perhaps 1,000 individuals. At night, mist rises from the warm water, creating a dreamscape where mariachi music from party boats echoes off colonial churches, a collision of centuries in Mexico's strangest agricultural system. The Sonoran Desert crosses into Mexico, covering 100,000 square miles, where the saguaro cactus, that symbol of the American West, grows with a patience that defies human timescales. These giants wait 75 years before sprouting their first arm, a celebration of survival in a landscape where rain might not fall for months. Some saguaros here stand 40 feet tall and weigh 8 tons, their pleated skin expanding to hold 200 gallons of water from a single storm. Their white flowers, Arizona's state flower though many grow in Mexico, open only at night, blooming for one evening before wilting in tomorrow's heat. The flowers smell like overripe melons, attracting long-nosed bats that co-evolved with these cacti over millions of years. Inside each saguaro, a woody skeleton supports the massive weight, these ribs persisting centuries after the cactus dies, used by indigenous peoples for construction and tools. Gila woodpeckers and elf owls excavate homes in the thick flesh, the cactus healing around these wounds to create permanent cavities. In certain valleys, thousands of saguaros stand like an army of patient giants, their arms reaching toward a sky that portions out water like a miser counting coins. Near Chichen Itza, Cenote Iquil drops through the earth like a perfectly round portal, 85 feet from ground level to water surface. Vines cascade 60 feet down from the opening, their roots seeking water in a green curtain that sways with every breeze. The cenote's mouth spans 200 feet in diameter, large enough that sunlight reaches the water only at midday, creating a column of light that illuminates the blue depths. Small waterfalls trickle over the rim where groundwater seeps through limestone, each drop adding to waters that have collected here for thousands of years. The ancient Maya considered this cenote sacred, throwing gold, jade, and human sacrifices into its depths during droughts. Divers have recovered these offerings from ledges hidden beneath the surface, artifacts preserved by the constant cool temperature and limestone-filtered water. Black catfish patrol the depths, descendants of fish that adapted to darkness over generations. Swimming here feels like floating in liquid sky, the water so clear that vertigo sometimes overtakes swimmers who look down into the blue void. At the water's edge, small blind fish navigate by pressure waves, their ancestors' eyes atrophied after generations in caves connected to this sun-dappled pool. The Santiago River in Jalisco has carved Oblatos Canyon 2,000 feet deep through volcanic rock laid down over 10 million years. Each layer in the canyon walls represents a different eruption, a library of volcanic history written in ash and lava. The river runs green in dry season, brown during rains, occasionally red when it carries iron-rich sediments from upstream mines. This same river that carved such grandeur begins as overflow from Lake Chapala, making this enormous canyon the work of Mexico's largest lake's excess water. The depth creates its own climate zones, tropical plants at the bottom where the river traps heat, pine forests on the rim where altitude brings coolness. Condors once soared these thermals, using rising air to patrol territories larger than cities. The canyon's acoustics carry sound in unexpected ways. Conversations from one rim reach the other despite the vast gap, while the river's roar vanishes in pockets of inexplicable silence. During colonial times, the canyon served as a hiding place for revolutionaries and bandits who knew its caves and hidden trails. The depth makes the canyon nearly invisible until you stand at its edge, the earth suddenly opening into unexpected vastness. Scorpion Reef, 80 miles north of Veracruz, rises from the Gulf of Mexico as the only coral atoll in these waters. 5 small islands built entirely from coral skeletons on an underwater mountain. Named for its shape resembling a scorpion's tail from above, or perhaps for the abundance of scorpion fish in its waters, this reef exists where it shouldn't. Most atolls form in the Pacific. This one defies expectations by thriving in the Gulf. The reef's isolation creates a biological island where species evolve separately from their mainland cousins. Grouper here grow larger than anywhere else in the Gulf, protected by distance from fishing pressure. The lighthouse on the largest island, built in 1885, stands on foundations of compressed coral, the entire structure slowly sinking as millions of years of coral skeletons compress beneath its weight. Frigate birds nest here by the thousands, traveling 100 miles to the mainland to feed, then returning to this speck of coral and sand. During hurricanes, waves wash completely over the islands, yet the coral survives, having evolved with these storms for millennia. Ships have wrecked here for centuries, their remains becoming part of the reef structure, cannons and anchors now encrusted with brain coral. The Valley of Mexico sits at 7,349 feet elevation in a closed basin that once held 5 interconnected lakes covering 580 square miles. The Spanish conquistadors described arriving at this water world, where the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan rose from Lake Texcoco, like a dream of Venice transplanted to the mountains. These lakes, Texcoco, Xochimilco, Chalco, Xaltocan, and Zumpango, were systematically drained over 4 centuries, their water banished through tunnels and canals to prevent flooding. Now only remnants remain, like Xochimilco's canals, while Mexico City sprawls across the dried lake bed. The absence of these lakes changed the regional climate, reducing rainfall and increasing temperature extremes. Dust storms now rise from exposed lake beds during dry season, carrying salt and minerals that once lay beneath water. The valley still wants to be a lake. Every rainy season, neighborhoods flood as water seeks its historical level. Ancient springs that fed the lakes still flow beneath the city, creating problems with subway construction and building foundations. Some ecologists dream of restoration, calculating that returning even part of the lakes could cool the city by several degrees and reduce air pollution that gets trapped in this bowl surrounded by volcanoes. Basasiachic Falls in Chihuahua plunges 807 feet in a single unbroken drop, creating a permanent cloud of mist that supports cloud forest species in the middle of pine forest. The waterfall exists because of a geological accident, a fault line that dropped one side of the canyon while lifting the other, creating this sudden step in the landscape. The mist zone around the fall's base harbors plants that shouldn't exist here. Tree ferns, orchids, and mosses that belong in tropical cloud forests 1,000 miles south. The water temperature drops 20 degrees during its fall, arriving at the bottom as a cold shock even in summer heat. In winter, ice formations build around the falling water, creating frozen curtains that frame the liquid center. The indigenous Raramuri people have trails that pass behind the waterfall, carved into cliffs over centuries of use. During spring snowmelt, the volume increases tenfold, the gentle veil becoming a thundering column that shakes the ground. Ravens play in the updrafts created by the falling water, diving through the mist in what appears to be pure joy. The canyon below the falls continues for miles, unexplored except by the most determined adventurers. The Grijalva River carries 30% of Mexico's surface water through Chiapas, more water than many famous world rivers, despite its relative anonymity. This river powers 4 major dams that generate half of Mexico's hydroelectric power. Its flow so reliable that engineers consider it liquid electricity. The river carved 4 major canyons through the Chiapas highlands, including Sumidero Canyon, with its vertical walls and Christmas tree waterfall. Ancient Maya cities lined its banks, using its predictable floods to time agricultural cycles. The river's mouth forms a vast delta where mangroves create nurseries for Gulf fisheries. During peak flow, the river carries enough sediment to visibly stain the Gulf of Mexico for miles, a brown plume that satellites track spreading nutrients that trigger plankton blooms. Howler monkeys follow the river corridor through otherwise inhospitable terrain, their territorial calls echoing off canyon walls at dawn. The river's name honors Juan de Grijalva, who explored it in 1518, though indigenous peoples had navigated its length for millennia before Europeans arrived. In some stretches, the river runs so deep that its bottom waters remain cold year-round, creating layers that don't mix, like separate rivers stacked vertically. The Marietta Islands near Puerto Vallarta conceal Playa del Amor, a hidden beach inside a collapsed volcanic crater accessible only through a 60-foot tunnel that floods at high tide. This secret beach exists because of military bombing practice in the early 1900s, which collapsed the roof of a sea cave, creating an opening to the sky. Now, sunlight illuminates a perfect circle of sand surrounded by rock walls, invisible from the ocean, unknown from land. The swim through the tunnel requires timing with the tides. At high tide, the tunnel fills completely. At low tide, swimmers can keep their heads above water. Inside, the beach forms a natural amphitheater where wave sounds echo and amplify. Blue-footed boobies nest on the crater rim, their feet truly blue from carotenoid pigments in the fish they eat. The islands were formed by volcanic activity along the Rivera Fracture Zone, part of the East Pacific Rise, where the ocean floor spreads apart. Jacques Cousteau fought to protect these islands, recognizing their biological richness. Humpback whales give birth in the warm waters here, teaching their calves to swim in the protected lee of the islands. The Sierra Madre Oriental stretches 620 miles like a wall between the Gulf coastal plain and the Mexican plateau, creating one of North America's most dramatic rain shadows. The eastern slopes, facing the Gulf, receive 80 inches of rain annually as moisture-laden air rises and cools. Cross to the western side, and rainfall drops to less than 20 inches, creating the deserts of the Mexican plateau. This mountain wall channels hurricanes northward, protecting central Mexico while devastating the coast. Cloud forests cling to the middle elevations, perpetually shrouded in mist that condenses on every surface. These forests harbor species from North and South America, a biological mixing zone where quetzals meet black bears. The limestone peaks hide thousands of caves, many containing pre-Columbian artifacts and some of the world's deepest vertical shafts. During the autumn raptor migration, millions of hawks, eagles, and vultures funnel along these mountains, creating rivers of birds that darken the sky. The mountains continue to rise, pushed upward by tectonic compression at rates measurable by GPS. In certain valleys, temperature inversions trap clouds below the peaks, creating a landscape where mountains become islands floating above white seas. Lac Quitseo in Michoacán transforms with the seasons like a shape-shifting mirror, spreading across 150 square miles during wet years, shrinking to 40 square miles during droughts. This dramatic fluctuation reveals and conceals human history. Pre-Hispanic causeways emerge during dry periods, complete with carved stones and ancient offerings. The lake has no outlet, making it endorheic, with salinity levels that vary from nearly fresh to saltier than the ocean depending on water volume. Millions of birds use the lake as a way station on migrations between North and South America. Their arrival times unchanged for millennia, despite the lake's variability. Local fishermen have developed techniques adapted to this uncertainty, using different nets and boats for different lake levels. The exposed lake bed during dry years becomes grazing land for cattle, the salt-tolerant grasses providing nutrition unavailable elsewhere. When the rains return, the lake can fill in weeks, flooding roads built by engineers who didn't believe local stories about high water marks. Sunset turns the shallow waters into sheets of copper and gold, colors so intense they seem unnatural. The lake acts as a climate moderator for the region, its presence or absence changing temperatures by several degrees. The Tropic of Cancer crosses Mexico at 23.4 degrees north latitude, an invisible line that marks where the sun stands directly overhead at noon on the summer solstice. This astronomical boundary passes through 11 Mexican states, creating a transition zone between tropical and temperate worlds. Along this line, biology becomes confused. Tropical parrots nest in pine trees, cacti grow alongside tree ferns, and ecosystems overlap in ways that shouldn't work but do. The indigenous peoples recognized this celestial significance, building observatories and monuments aligned with the solstice sun. Modern highways cross the tropic with monuments marking the spot, though the line actually moves about 15 meters south each year due to Earth's axial wobble. At solar noon on June 21st, vertical objects cast no shadows along this line, a phenomenon that still draws crowds to witness the sun's perfect overhead passage. The tropic determines hurricane paths, agricultural zones, and migration patterns. Desert exists both north and south of the line, but with different characteristics. The northern Chihuahuan desert adapted to winter freezes. The southern tropical dry forests adapted to pronounced wet and dry seasons rather than temperature extremes. Sistema Huautla in Oaxaca descends 5,118 feet through 25 entrances, creating the Western Hemisphere's deepest cave system. Explorers have mapped over 40 miles of passages, finding underground rivers, waterfalls that plunge through darkness, and chambers large enough to hold cathedrals. The cave breathes. Air pressure differences between entrances create winds that howl through passages strong enough to extinguish headlamps. Some passages flood completely during rainy season, trapping pockets of air that compress and decompress with water level changes. The deepest sections remain unexplored, blocked by sumps, water-filled passages that might continue for feet or miles. Cave-adapted species thrive in the permanent darkness. Blind fish, transparent spiders, and centipedes that navigate by touch and vibration. Ancient human remains found deep in the system suggest ritual use, though how prehistoric peoples navigated such depths without modern equipment remains mysterious. The limestone formed from compressed sea creatures when this mountain was ocean floor, their shells now dissolved into passages that water carved over millions of years. Local Mazatec people consider the cave system sacred, believing it connects to the underworld. The main entrance exhales cool air even on the hottest days, a natural air conditioning that influences vegetation patterns around each opening. Celestune Biosphere. Reserve in Yucatan encompasses 146,000 acres, where underground freshwater rivers meet the Gulf of Mexico, creating brackish lagoons that turn pink with flamingos. Up to 40,000 flamingos gather here, their collective presence turning entire bays into living sunsets. The birds' pink coloration comes from carotenoid pigments in the tiny shrimp they filter from the hypersaline water. These lagoons exist because fresh water flowing through underground channels emerges at the coast, creating salinity gradients that support unique ecosystems at each level. Mangrove forests here include 4 species that sort themselves by salt tolerance: red mangroves standing in salt water, black mangroves just behind, white mangroves on higher ground, and buttonwood at the terrestrial edge. This zonation creates habitat ribbons that different species use like apartment floors. The reserve protects one of the last healthy populations of Mexican crocodiles, ancient reptiles that have survived since the age of dinosaurs. At night, their eyes reflect red in flashlight beams, hundreds of ruby dots floating in dark water. The freshwater springs that feed the system maintain constant temperatures year-round, creating thermal refuges where tropical fish survive cold fronts that would otherwise kill them. The Mesa Central Plateau sprawls across 85,000 square miles at an average elevation of 6,000 feet, a highland that holds 70% of Mexico's population on volcanic soil enriched by millions of years of eruptions. This plateau exists because tectonic forces lifted the land, while volcanic activity filled basins with lava and ash, creating vast flat surfaces between mountain ranges. The elevation moderates temperatures, making this tropical latitude feel temperate, with cool nights even in summer. Ancient lakes filled depressions in this plateau, their dried beds now holding major cities. The soil depth varies dramatically. In some places, bedrock lies inches below the surface. In others, volcanic ash accumulated hundreds of feet deep. Rain falls seasonally, creating a landscape that shifts from brown to green as dramatically as changing stage sets. The plateau's elevation means water boils at lower temperatures, trees grow more slowly, and humans produce more red blood cells to capture scarce oxygen. During the Pleistocene, this plateau hosted megafauna, giant ground sloths, mammoths, and saber-toothed cats whose fossils emerge from construction sites. The plateau tilts slightly southward, causing rivers to flow toward the Pacific. Though the eastern Sierra Madre Oriental wasn't there, they would flow to the Gulf. Agua Azul waterfalls in Chiapas cascade over 230 limestone steps, each one tinted turquoise by dissolved minerals that give these falls their name, blue water. The limestone terraces formed over millennia as calcium carbonate precipitated from the water, building natural dams that create hundreds of pools. Each pool maintains slightly different temperatures and mineral concentrations, creating microenvironments where different species of fish and plants thrive. The blue color intensifies during dry season when sediment loads decrease, allowing the limestone's natural turquoise to dominate. During rainy season, the water turns brown with upstream sediment, completely changing the fall's character. The constant 77-degree temperature makes these pools comfortable year-round, though swimming changes the water color temporarily as skin oils interact with dissolved minerals. Tree roots grip the limestone terraces, their growth gradually breaking apart formations that took centuries to build, ensuring the landscape constantly evolves. Local Celtal Maya have names for individual pools, some considered sacred, others used for washing, still others believed to have healing properties. The sound of water falling over limestone creates a white noise that some claim induces trance states, a phenomenon the Maya incorporated into religious ceremonies. Cabo Pulmo Reef on the Sea of Cortez represents one of ocean conservation's greatest success stories. This reef nearly died in the 1980s from overfishing, reduced to bare rock with few fish. Local fishermen, seeing their livelihoods disappearing, made the radical decision to stop fishing entirely, creating a no-take reserve. Within 10 years, fish biomass increased by 463%, and recovery rate that surprised even optimistic marine biologists. The reef now hosts massive schools of jackfish that form silvery tornadoes, bull sharks that patrol the deep edges, and giant grouper that had vanished for decades. This 25,000-year-old reef, the northernmost coral reef in the eastern Pacific, exists at the edge of coral's temperature tolerance. Winter water temperatures drop near the coral's survival limit, while summer temperatures approach their upper threshold. The reef's location at the confluence of tropical and temperate waters creates unusual species combinations. Tropical angelfish swimming alongside temperate sea lions. Night diving reveals a different reef, with octopi hunting crabs, moray eels emerging from crevices, and coral polyps extending their tentacles to feed on plankton. The reef generates its own currents, upwellings that bring nutrients from the deep, feeding the entire food chain. The Continental Divide crosses Mexico's Sierra Madre Occidental for 750 miles, an invisible line separating Pacific-bound waters from those flowing to the Atlantic. A raindrop falling on the western side will reach the Pacific, while one falling meters away on the eastern side begins a journey to the Gulf of Mexico. This hydrological boundary doesn't always follow the highest peaks. In some places, it snakes through valleys where geological quirks send water in unexpected directions. The divide influences more than just water flow. It creates distinct ecological zones, weather patterns, and even cultural regions. Pacific slopes receive winter rainfall from storms tracking down from California, while Atlantic slopes get summer rain from Gulf moisture and hurricanes. These different rainfall patterns create entirely different forests on opposite sides of the same mountain. The Tarahumara people traditionally lived along the divide, using both watersheds seasonally, descending to warm canyons in winter and climbing to cool highlands in summer. Ancient trade routes followed the divide, using ridgelines as highways above the difficult canyon country. Some sections of the divide are so subtle that road signs mark the crossing, while others form knife-edge ridges where the separation is dramatic. Cenote Zacatán in Tamaulipas plunges 1,099 feet deep, the world's deepest water-filled sinkhole, its bottom heated by volcanic vents that maintain the water at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. This cenote formed differently from Yucatan's limestone sinkholes. Volcanic activity created this shaft, with acidic gases dissolving rock from below, rather than surface water eroding from above. The water contains high levels of sulfur, creating an ecosystem based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. Bacteria here convert sulfur compounds into energy, forming the base of a food chain that exists in permanent darkness. The water stratifies into distinct layers with different chemical compositions, each layer supporting different microorganisms. NASA tested a robotic probe here designed for Jupiter's moon Europa, recognizing similarities between this alien-like environment and possible extraterrestrial oceans. The cenote's walls contain caves that remain unexplored, their entrances visible to divers but too dangerous to enter. Local ranchers report that the water level rises and falls with no correlation to rainfall, suggesting deep connections to regional hydrothermal systems. Swimming at the surface feels normal, but descending even 30 feet brings increasing water temperature and sulfur smell that makes deeper exploration challenging, even with specialized equipment. Peña de Bernal in Querétaro rises 1,421 feet as the world's third largest monolith, a single block of volcanic rock that cooled underground 8.7 million years ago. Erosion stripped away softer surrounding rock, revealing this geological sculpture that indigenous peoples considered the place where the gods touched Earth. The rock face changes color throughout the day: pink at dawn, white at noon, golden at sunset, silver in moonlight. The monolith formed from magma that cooled slowly deep underground, creating unusually large crystals that give the rock its distinctive sparkle. Climbers report that the rock remains cool even in direct sun, its massive thermal mass absorbing heat slowly. Every spring equinox, thousands gather to absorb what they believe is special energy released by the monolith on this day. The surrounding desert blooms after rain with endemic species that grow nowhere else, adapted to the unique minerals weathering from this ancient volcanic neck. Peregrine falcons nest on the sheer faces, their hunting dives from the summit reaching speeds over 200 miles per hour. The monolith continues to erode, losing about 1 millimeter per century, meaning it will stand for millions of years more. The Baja California Peninsula continues its slow divorce from mainland Mexico, separating at 2 inches per year as the Pacific Plate pulls it northwest. This separation began 5 million years ago when the East Pacific Rise rifting zone jumped inland, beginning to tear the peninsula away like a giant zipper opening from south to north. GPS measurements confirm this movement, showing Cabo San Lucas moving toward Alaska while mainland Mexico stays put. This rifting created the Gulf of California, which will eventually become an ocean as the peninsula continues its northwestern journey. The separation isn't smooth. It happens in jolts during earthquakes, sudden movements followed by decades of quiet accumulation of stress. Eventually, millions of years from now, Baja will be an island, then continue north to collide with Alaska. The rifting creates unique geology: hot springs where magma approaches the surface, volcanic islands in the Gulf, and transform faults that offset riverbeds and roads. Marine fossils found high in Baja's mountains prove the land has also been rising as it separates, lifted by the same forces tearing it away. The indigenous Cochimí people have legends about the land being torn apart by giants, a mythological description of geological reality. Las Coloradas, salt flats in Yucatan, transform into a landscape from another planet, where 15 square miles of evaporation ponds turn bubblegum pink from microscopic life. This color comes from algae and brine shrimp that thrive in water saltier than the Dead Sea, producing beta-carotene as sunscreen against the intense tropical light. The concentration of these organisms changes with the seasons, creating a palette that shifts from pale rose to deep magenta. Salt has been harvested here since Maya times. The ancient evaporation ponds rebuilt and expanded, but following the same principles: sun and wind doing the work that machines do elsewhere. The salt mountains that rise beside the ponds gleam white against the pink water, creating a color combination that seems impossible in nature. Flamingos feed in the saltiest ponds, their bodies already pink, wading through pink water under pink-tinged clouds that reflect the pond's color. Workers here develop a sense for the salt's readiness by the water's exact shade of pink, harvesting at the moment when color indicates perfect crystallization. The ponds create their own microclimate, the salt-heavy air shimmering with heat mirages that make the landscape wobble like a dream. 750,000 tons of salt emerge annually from these pink waters, each crystal formed from Pacific water that traveled through underground rivers to emerge here. The Tamil waterfall in San Luis Potosi presents a study in contrasts where two rivers refuse to blend. The turquoise Galenas River joins the coffee-colored Santa Maria River at the fall's crest, but the waters maintain their separate identities for several hundred yards after the 345-foot plunge. This color separation occurs because the rivers carry different sediments and minerals. The Galenas filtered through limestone caves, the Santa Maria stained by upstream soil. The waterfall's power varies dramatically with season, sometimes a gentle veil, other times a thundering column that generates mist visible for miles. Behind the main fall, smaller springs emerge directly from the cliff face, their mineral-rich waters painting orange and white streaks down the rock. The plunge pool at the base reaches depths of over 100 feet, carved by centuries of falling water that acts like a liquid drill. During dry season, adventurous swimmers can approach the falls by boat, feeling the temperature drop as mist creates its own weather system. The indigenous Teaneck people consider the falls sacred, believing the two rivers represent the dual nature of existence, clarity and opacity, purity and earthiness, joining but never fully merging, like parallel destinies sharing the same path. Sótano de las Golondrinas hosts a daily miracle when 2 million white-collared swifts and green parakeets tornado from its depths each dawn. This emergence takes 30 minutes as the birds spiral upward to avoid collisions in the 1,200-foot vertical shaft, creating a living vortex that generates its own wind. The sound begins as a whisper, building to a roar as millions of wings beat in the confined space. Each bird follows an ancient pattern, maintaining precise spacing from its neighbors, the entire flock moving like a single organism. At dusk, the process reverses, but dramatically. The birds fold their wings and plummet into the darkness at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour, opening their wings at the last moment to break. This controlled falling looks suicidal, but works perfectly, each bird somehow avoiding the others in the darkness. The cave bottom supports a unique ecosystem fed by bird guano accumulated over millennia, creating soil so rich that specialized cave plants grow in the dim light. The bird's body heat raises the cave temperature, creating updrafts that help them exit each morning. Local Huastec mythology describes the cave as a portal between worlds, the birds carrying messages between the underworld and sky. Mexico's Pacific coast stretches 4,395 miles, a coastline longer than the distance from New York to London, shaped by 36 major hurricanes since 1970. Each hurricane reshapes beaches, moving millions of tons of sand, destroying human development while creating new habitats. The coast encompasses every possible shore type: black sand beaches from volcanic erosion, white coral sand bays, rocky cliffs where waves explode into spray, peaceful lagoons protected by barrier islands. The continental shelf varies from nearly non-existent, where deep trenches approach the shore, to broad, shallow platforms where waves break far from land. This variation creates different wave patterns that surfers read like scripture, knowing which breaks work on which swells. Sea turtles use these beaches for nesting, somehow returning to the exact beach where they were born decades earlier. The coastal current changes direction seasonally, flowing north in summer, south in winter, creating different conditions for marine life. Mangrove forests line much of the tropical coast, their roots filtering runoff and providing nurseries for fish that spend adult lives on offshore reefs. The coast's orientation, running northwest to southeast, means it catches storms from multiple directions: Pacific hurricanes in summer, occasional Tehuano winds in winter, The Lerma River system drains 47,000 square miles of central Mexico, beginning in the mountains above Toluca and flowing 466 miles to Lake Chapala. This river essentially flows into itself, feeding Mexico's largest lake before continuing as the Santiago River to reach the Pacific. The Lerma ranks among Mexico's most engineered rivers, with hundreds of dams and diversions that redirect much of its flow to Mexico City. The river's path follows ancient geological faults, turning at right angles where it encounters different rock formations. Its watershed encompasses multiple climate zones, from pine forests at its source to tropical deciduous forest near the coast. The river once supported a rich ecosystem of endemic fish species, many now extinct due to pollution and water extraction. During the rainy season, the river can increase its flow 100-fold, transforming from a trickle to a torrent within hours. Ancient civilizations thrived along its banks, the Purepecha, Otomi, and others who recognized the river's importance for agriculture. The sediments it carries have filled valleys with some of Mexico's richest agricultural soil, deposits dozens of feet thick, representing millions of years of erosion from the surrounding mountains. Today, the river struggles, its flow so reduced that it sometimes disappears entirely in dry seasons. Cenote Samula, near Valladolid, creates a natural cathedral where tree roots descend 30 feet through limestone to reach water, forming a living curtain that moves with every breeze. A single hole in the ceiling admits a shaft of sunlight that tracks across the water as the day progresses, illuminating different sections of this underground pool. The roots belong to a ceiba tree, sacred to the Maya, whose determination to reach water created this organic chandelier. Small fish navigate between the roots, which provide shelter and attract insects that fall from the world above. The cenote's water maintains perfect clarity, filtered through limestone until it achieves the purity of distilled water with added minerals. Stalactites ring the chamber's edge, some reaching the water to become columns, others hanging like frozen waterfalls. The acoustics make every sound linger, voices echoing back changed in pitch and tone. Swimming here feels like floating in liquid crystal, the water so clear that depth becomes difficult to judge. The Maya performed ceremonies here, evident from pottery shards and jade objects recovered from the depths. The temperature never varies, maintaining a constant coolness that provides relief from the jungle heat above. The Vizcaíno Desert in central Baja California receives just 3 inches of rain annually, yet this apparent desolation supports 500 plant species found nowhere else on Earth. These endemic species evolved in isolation, adapted to specific combinations of fog, rare rain, and mineral-rich soil. The bujum tree grows here, a plant so unusual that botanists initially refused to believe it existed, its trunk sprouting branches like an upside-down carrot that can live 500 years. Fog from the Pacific provides most moisture, condensing on plant surfaces designed to channel every drop to roots. Some cacti here grow microscopic grooves that direct water flow, while others have waxy coatings that prevent any loss. The desert blooms explosively after rare rains, dormant seeds germinating within hours to complete their life cycle before drought returns. These brief flowerings attract millions of migrating butterflies and hummingbirds that somehow time their journeys to coincide with blooms. The soil contains high concentrations of rare minerals, creating chemistry that would kill most plants, but which these specialists require. At night, the desert transforms as nocturnal species emerge, their activities visible only to patient observers who sit still enough to become part of the landscape. Horsetail Falls in Monterey exists only half the year, disappearing entirely during the dry season when the stream that feeds it vanishes into limestone. During the rainy season, it drops 95 feet into a pool that appears and disappears with the water flow. The falls earned its name from its resemblance to a horse's tail, the water spreading and separating as it descends over irregular rock. The seasonal nature creates unique ecology, organisms that must complete their life cycles during the wet months or survive desiccation. Certain mosses here can lose 99% of their water and survive, rehydrating within minutes when the falls return. The pool at the base hosts fairy shrimp, whose eggs survive years of drought, hatching within hours of water's return. Local weather patterns determine the fall's schedule. If winter rains fail, the falls might not flow at all. In wet years, they might run nearly year-round. The surrounding canyon walls show watermarks from exceptional years when floods turned this seasonal trickle into a raging torrent. Rock climbers use the dry season to ascend routes that become impossible when water returns, their chalk marks washed away with the first rains. The Balsas River Basin covers 42,000 square miles, larger than South Korea, draining the southern Sierra Madre before reaching the Pacific. This river system captures water from dramatically different elevations and climates, from snow-capped volcanoes to tropical lowlands. The Balsas has carved some of Mexico's deepest canyons, though they remain largely unknown because no roads follow the river's course. The basin acts like a biological corridor, allowing tropical species to penetrate deep into the continental interior along the warm river valley. Ancient Mezcala culture thrived here, leaving behind sophisticated stone sculptures that suggest complex civilizations in what now seems like wilderness. The river's sediment load is enormous, building its delta seaward measurably each year. During peak flow, the river runs red with iron-rich soil from the highlands, a color visible from space. The basin encompasses multiple isolated valleys where evolution has produced endemic species, each valley a laboratory for adaptation. Hydroelectric projects have tamed portions of the river, but most remains wild, accessible only by boat or foot. The river's name comes from the Spanish word for rafts, referring to indigenous river transportation that continued until recently. Guadalupe Island rises from the Pacific 150 miles west of Baja California, the exposed peak of an underwater volcano reaching 4,257 feet above sea level. This isolation has created unique species, including the Guadalupe fir, seal, once thought extinct, and island endemic plants found nowhere else. The island generates its own weather, forcing Pacific moisture upward to create clouds that shroud the peaks, even when surrounding ocean stretches clear to every horizon. Great white sharks congregate in these waters, drawn by seal colonies, creating one of the world's premier sites for observing these predators. The island's forests, devastated by introduced goats over 2 centuries, show signs of recovery after the goats' removal, with endemic pines and oaks growing from seeds that waited decades for their chance. Elephant seals breed on the beaches, their battles for territory shaking the ground. The surrounding waters drop quickly to abyssal depths, creating upwellings that support extraordinary marine productivity. Mexican fishing families lived here for generations, developing unique cultivation techniques for the fog-dependent agriculture. The island serves as a waypoint for migrating seabirds traveling between Alaska and tropical waters, some species resting nowhere else on their 1,000-mile journeys. The Cave of Crystals maintains 99% humidity because the selenite formations dissolve if temperatures exceed 108 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a self-regulating environment of crushing heat and saturation. Scientists entering this underground greenhouse must wear suits with cooling systems, their time limited to 45 minutes before heat exhaustion becomes life-threatening. The crystals continue growing at rates barely measurable, adding perhaps a hair's width per century. Patient construction that will continue until geological forces drain the cave or destroy it. The formation water contains exactly the right concentration of minerals. Too little, and crystals won't form. Too much, and they grow too fast to achieve transparency. This perfect chemical balance maintained for 500,000 years created crystals of optical quality, so clear that light passes through 30-foot beams. The cave exists because of a magma chamber below that heats groundwater, creating the convection currents that circulated mineral-rich water through the cavity. When mining operations pumped out the water, they revealed this hidden cathedral, though when pumping stops, water will return, and the crystals will resume their millennial growth. The cave demonstrates nature's ability to create perfection through patience. Each crystal, a meditation on time, scales beyond human comprehension. Lake Zirawen in Michoacan fills a volcanic crater so perfectly circular it seems artificial. 130 feet deep, with water clear enough to see pre-Hispanic pottery on the bottom. The lake formed when a volcanic explosion created this bowl in the mountains, later sealed by lava flows that made it watertight. No surface streams feed the lake. All water comes from springs rising through the volcanic rock, maintaining remarkable purity. The surrounding forests of pine and oak reflect in the still water, creating perfect mirror images broken only by rising fish. The lake harbors species that evolved in isolation, including a white fish found nowhere else. Local Purepecha legends speak of a city beneath the waters, visible on certain clear days, though what people see are rock formations that imagination transforms into buildings. The lake's depth creates thermoclines, temperature layers that fish navigate like underwater weather systems. In winter, mist rises from the warmer water, creating fog that fills the crater until sunshine burns it away. The acoustic properties of the crater shape mean sounds carry across the water with unusual clarity. Conversations on one shore audible on the opposite bank. The Tehuacan-Cuicatlan Valley contains Earth's highest density of columnar cacti, with 86 species standing like green pillars across 4,000 square miles of rain-shadow desert. Some of these cacti reach 60 feet tall, taking centuries to achieve such height, their growth rings recording droughts and plenty like wooden calendars. This valley exists because the Sierra Madre Oriental blocks moisture from the Gulf, creating one of Mexico's driest regions. The cacti forest looks almost architectural, thousands of columns arranged as if by design, their spacing determined by competition for water. Each species occupies its own ecological niche, some growing on cliff faces, others in valley bottoms, each adapted to specific soil chemistry and water availability. When they bloom, the cacti attract clouds of bats, bees, and hummingbirds, the desert briefly becoming one of Mexico's most biodiverse regions. The indigenous Papaloca people learned to harvest cactus fruits, process their fibers, and use their wood for construction, developing a cactus-based civilization. Archaeological sites here show 10,000 years of human habitation, sustained by these plants that turn sunlight and rare rain into food, fiber, and medicine. Playa Balandra near La Paz creates an aquatic impossibility, water that remains ankle-deep for 500 feet from shore, heated by the sun to 95 degrees in summer. A sandbar creates this vast, shallow pool, protected from waves and currents, essentially a natural hot tub the size of several football fields. The shallow depth and white sand bottom create watercolors that shift from pale turquoise to deep azure as clouds pass overhead. The heat creates its own ecosystem of extremophiles, organisms that thrive in conditions that would kill most marine life. Small rays bury themselves in the sand, visible only as outline shadows. Mangrove seedlings take root in the shallows, their salt-filtering roots creating freshwater islands in the hypersaline environment. The beach's signature rock formation, a mushroom-shaped pinnacle carved by wind and waves, stands as a monument to erosion's artistry. At highest tides, the shallows disappear and normal ocean conditions prevail, but as water recedes, the magical shallow pool reforms. Early morning brings feeding frenzies as fish chase smaller prey into water too shallow for escape. The water's high temperature and salinity create unusual light refraction, making objects appear closer or farther than reality. Mexico contains 68 distinct indigenous linguistic regions, each corresponding to specific geographical features that isolated populations for millennia, creating a map where language follows landscape. Mountain ranges separate Zapotec from Mixtec speakers, deep canyons divide Rarámuri from Tepehuan communities, and deserts isolate Seri from their neighbors. This linguistic geography reveals how terrain shapes culture. Coastal peoples developed words for dozens of wave types. Mountain dwellers named minute variations in slope and stone. Desert inhabitants distinguished between subtle differences in sand and wind. Some languages contain no word for snow, while others have dozens of terms for rain types. The geographical isolation that created this diversity also preserved it. Languages survived conquest because their speakers lived in places too remote or difficult for outsiders to reach. Each language encodes geographical knowledge, migration routes embedded in place names, water sources remembered in songs, seasonal patterns preserved in ceremonies. Modern roads and communication blur these boundaries, but geography still influences dialect. The Spanish, spoken in isolated mountain villages, differs from that in connected valleys. This linguistic map represents thousands of years of human adaptation to Mexico's varied terrain. Popocatépetl volcano has erupted continuously since 2005, a gentle but persistent reminder that Mexico City sits 43 miles from an active volcanic threat. Almost daily, the volcano releases ash plumes that drift over the capital, dusting cars and buildings with fine volcanic powder. This constant activity actually reduces risk. Regular small emissions prevent pressure buildup that could cause catastrophic eruption. The volcano's name means smoking mountain in Nahuatl, suggesting similar activity witnessed by the Aztecs. Its elevation of 17,800 feet means its summit exists in permanent winter, snow mixing with ash to create gray glaciers. The volcano generates its own weather, its heat creating updrafts that form clouds even on clear days. Monitoring equipment detects hundreds of small earthquakes daily, the mountain constantly adjusting to moving magma. The ash provides mineral-rich soil that supports agriculture on the volcano's lower slopes, farmers accepting risk for fertility. Sulfur dioxide emissions create acid rain that affects forests dozens of miles away. During stronger eruptions, airlines reroute flights and schools close, modern life adapting to geological rhythms. The volcano features in countless legends, usually paired with neighboring Iztaccíhuatl in stories of lovers transformed into mountains. Cenotes Quequén near Valladolid demonstrates nature's persistence as stalactites continue growing underwater, adding 1 millimeter every 20 years despite being submerged. These formations began growing when the cave was dry during lower sea levels, then continued after flooding, the limestone deposition process adapting to aquatic conditions. The cenotes' turquoise water comes from dissolved limestone that acts like natural pool clarifier, precipitating particles to maintain extraordinary clarity. Hundreds of stalactites create a forest of stone fingers pointing toward water that mirrors them perfectly. A small opening in the ceiling admits a beam of light that illuminates different formations as the sun moves, creating an ever-changing sculpture gallery. The acoustics make swimming sounds echo mysteriously, each splash reverberating through the chamber. Fish here have adapted to life among the formations, using stalactites as territory markers and breeding sites. The Maya left offerings here: pottery, jade, and human remains that speak of ceremonies performed in this underground cathedral. Tree roots penetrate through ceiling cracks, their tips touching water in delicate kisses between surface and underground worlds. The constant temperature and humidity create conditions where time seems suspended, each visit feeling like entering an eternal present. The Gulf of California formed 5.3 million years ago as the Baja Peninsula rifted away from mainland Mexico, creating a 700-mile-long sea studded with 900 volcanic islands and islets. This new ocean began as a series of basins that flooded as the land pulled apart, eventually connecting to create a continuous sea. The Gulf acts as a natural laboratory for evolution, each island developing unique species in isolation. The waters host extraordinary diversity, from the world's smallest porpoise, the vaquita, to blue whales, the largest animals ever known. The Gulf's shape funnels tidal energy, creating some of Earth's most extreme tides, up to 23 feet in the northern reaches. These tidal movements generate currents that bring deep, nutrient-rich water to the surface, supporting marine productivity that rivals anywhere on the planet. Jacques Cousteau called it the aquarium of the world, recognizing its biological richness. The surrounding deserts contribute almost no fresh water, making this essentially a marine lake with ocean connections. Underwater mountains rise from depths of 10,000 feet to just below the surface, creating upwellings that concentrate marine life. The Gulf continues widening at measurable rates, someday to become an ocean. Lagunas de Montebello National Park contains 59 lakes ranging from emerald to violet, their colors determined by different mineral compositions, depths, and microscopic organisms. These lakes formed in a limestone landscape dissolved by slightly acidic rainwater over millions of years, creating depressions that filled with water. Each lake has unique chemistry, some rich in sulfur compounds that create blue colors, others with iron that produces greens, still others with organic matter that creates darker hues. The lakes connect through underground channels, water flowing invisibly between bodies that appear separate on the surface. Some lakes are warm from underground springs, others cold from mountain runoff, creating temperature variations that affect their biology. The deepest reach 656 feet, their bottoms never touched by sunlight, hosting organisms that live in permanent darkness. Maya legends speak of these lakes as mirrors where gods examined their appearances, each lake reflecting different aspects of divinity. The surrounding forest changes with elevation, from tropical at lower lakes to pine oak at higher elevations. Some lakes change color seasonally as algae bloom or minerals precipitate. On still mornings, mist rises from warmer lakes, while cooler ones remain clear, creating a landscape where each body of water breathes independently. The Coahuila Desert contains gypsum dunes that migrate 3 feet per year, burying and uncovering archaeological sites in predictable 300-year cycles. These dunes form from gypsum eroded from surrounding mountains, the mineral soft enough that rain dissolves it but dry enough here that dunes persist. The gypsum crystals break down into sand that glows white in moonlight, creating a landscape that seems snow-covered in the desert. As dunes migrate, they reveal artifacts from different time periods: Paleo-Indian projectile points, Spanish colonial items, Apache camping sites, a moving window into history. Plants here have adapted to burial, some growing fast enough to keep pace with dune movement, others going dormant until sand passes. The dunes sing when wind moves sand grains at specific angles, a low humming that carries for miles on quiet nights. Morning dew causes gypsum to temporarily cement, creating a crust that breaks underfoot with distinctive crunching. Some dunes have cores of older, cemented gypsum, mobile sand moving over stationary foundations. Animals leave perfect tracks in the soft gypsum that last until wind erases them. The predictable migration rate allows archaeologists to calculate when sites will next be exposed. Rio Grande de Santiago carved Oblatos Canyon through 10 distinct lava flows, each one representing a different volcanic eruption over 2 million years of geological violence and calm. The river cuts through these layers like a knife through a chocolate layer cake, revealing bands of different colored rock: black basalt, red scoria, gray ash compressed into stone. Each layer tells its own story of eruption, some violent explosions that threw ash miles into prehistoric skies, others slow flows of lava that crept across ancient landscapes. Between some layers lie ancient soils where forests once grew, now compressed into thin lines of organic material that speak of peaceful interludes between eruptions. The river exposed these secrets gradually, patient water wearing through rock that once flowed as liquid fire. The canyon walls stand as a geological textbook, time made visible in stone. Modern Guadalajara sits above this canyon, most residents unaware of the volcanic history beneath their feet. During certain lighting conditions, the layered walls glow with different intensities, each rock type reflecting sunlight uniquely. Birds nest in cavities where gas bubbles in cooling lava created perfect holes. The river continues its work, deepening the canyon grain by grain, carrying dissolved minerals toward the Pacific, slowly erasing this record even as it reveals it. Contoy Island stretches just 5 miles long, 19 miles north of Cancun, yet this small sanctuary hosts 152 bird species, including 10,000 breeding pairs of magnificent frigate birds. The island remains uninhabited by humans, allowing birds to claim every available space. Pelicans on beaches, frigate birds in low bushes, terns on open ground. During nesting season, the sound becomes overwhelming. Thousands of voices creating a symphony of squawks, cries, and calls that carries miles across open water. The frigate birds inflate their red throat sacs like balloons, creating a landscape dotted with crimson spheres among green vegetation. The island acts as a nursery for the entire region's seabirds, its protection vital for populations throughout the Caribbean. Surrounded by coral reefs, the waters teem with fish that feed diving birds, creating feeding frenzies visible from shore. The island's position at the confluence of Caribbean and Gulf waters brings nutrients that support the entire food chain. Turtle grass beds in shallow lagoons shelter juvenile fish that grow before venturing to deeper waters. The white sand beaches reflect heat, creating thermals that soaring birds ride without flapping for hours. Only researchers and limited tour groups may visit, their footsteps restricted to designated paths to protect nesting sites. The Huasteca Potosina region contains over 2,000 caves formed through an unusual process, where sulfuric acid from deep oil deposits dissolved limestone from below, rather than the typical surface water erosion. This bottom-up cave formation created chambers and passages unlike typical limestone caves, with features that seem to defy gravity. The acid, rising from petroleum deposits, ate through rock along fractures and faults, creating vertical shafts and horizontal galleries in seemingly random patterns. Some caves exhale hydrogen sulfide gas, the smell of rotten eggs warning explorers of dangerous air. Others contain crystal-clear pools where blind cave fish navigate by pressure waves, their ancestors' eyes atrophied after millennia in darkness. The region's caves often connect through flooded passages, creating an underground network that speleologists are still mapping. Indigenous Huastec and Nahua peoples knew these caves for centuries, using them for ceremonies and shelter, leaving pottery and artwork deep underground. During the rainy season, some caves become rivers, water thundering through passages that remain dry for months. Vampire bats roost in darker chambers, emerging at night to feed on cattle, their presence affecting local ranching practices. The caves maintain constant temperatures year-round, providing refuge for species that couldn't survive surface temperature extremes. Mexico's position on the Ring of Fire gives it 3,000 volcanic vents, though only 48 have erupted in recorded history and 12 remain active today. These vents range from massive stratovolcanoes to small cinder cones that might never erupt again. They trace the boundaries where tectonic plates meet, grinding against each other in slow-motion collisions that occasionally release tremendous energy. The distribution isn't random. They follow clear lines marking where oceanic plates dive beneath continental crust, melting as they descend to feed surface volcanoes. Some vents release only gas, sulfurous breath from Earth's interior that kills vegetation in circles around fumaroles. Others build mountains grain by grain, ash and lava accumulating over millennia. The volcanic soil they create supports Mexico's most productive agriculture, minerals from Earth's interior enriching fields. Cities cluster near volcanoes despite the risk, drawn by fertile soil and flat land between peaks. Each volcano has its own personality. Colima erupts frequently but gently. Popocatépetl rumbles constantly. El Chichón sleeps for centuries, then explodes catastrophically. Traditional cultures developed sophisticated understanding of volcanic behavior, recognizing warning signs. Modern science has only recently learned to interpret. The volcanoes continue reshaping Mexico, building new land while destroying old. The Sian-Ka'an Biosphere Reserve spans 1.3 million acres, where 23 cenotes connect through underground rivers flowing beneath jungle toward the Caribbean. This vast wetland encompasses every possible coastal ecosystem: reef, seagrass beds, mangroves, coastal dunes, freshwater marshes, tropical forest. The underground rivers emerge at the coast as freshwater springs in the ocean, creating unique mixing zones where fresh and saltwater species mingle. Jaguars hunt along beaches at night, their tracks mixing with those of nesting sea turtles. The reserve protects one of the healthiest portions of the Mesoamerican reef, where elkhorn coral still thrives despite dying elsewhere. Manatees graze in coastal lagoons, their slow movements through seagrass beds like underwater clouds drifting. The wetlands act as kidneys for the region, filtering runoff before it reaches the reef. Spider monkeys move through canopy bridges over water, never touching ground for miles. Ancient Maya canals still function, connecting lagoons through passages carved when this was a thriving trade network. Crocodiles patrol these waterways, sometimes reaching 15 feet, remnants from the age of reptiles. The name means "where the sky is born" in Maya, referring to the horizon where Caribbean blue meets endless wetlands. Prismas basalticos in Hidalgo displays 98-foot-tall hexagonal basalt columns formed when lava cooled at precise rates 2.5 million years ago. These geometric formations resulted from contraction, as molten rock solidified, the hexagonal shape representing nature's most efficient way to release stress in cooling material. Each column stands perfectly vertical, creating what looks like a giant's pipe organ carved from stone. Water cascades over these columns from a dam above, the flow highlighting the geometric perfection. The hexagonal pattern repeats at different scales, visible in individual columns and in how columns cluster together. Similar formations exist in Northern Ireland's Giant's Causeway and California's Devil's Postpile, but these Mexican columns achieve exceptional height and symmetry. The indigenous Otomi people incorporated these formations into their mythology, seeing them as stairs used by gods to descend from sky to earth. The cooling rate that created these columns was remarkably consistent. Too fast and columns would be thin and irregular. Too slow and they wouldn't form at all. Between columns, spaces fill with mineral deposits from centuries of water flow, creating colorful veins in the dark basalt. At sunset, the columns glow orange, their faces catching light at different angles as the sun moves. The Campeche Bank extends 180 miles into the Gulf of Mexico as a shallow carbonate platform where petroleum deposits formed from marine organisms that lived 150 million years ago. This underwater plateau averages just 100 feet deep, its limestone surface pocked with sinkholes and covered with coral reefs. The bank's edge drops abruptly to depths exceeding 10,000 feet, creating upwellings that bring nutrients from the deep. Oil platforms extract petroleum from deposits beneath the limestone, wells reaching through rock that once was living reef. The shallow waters warm quickly, generating afternoon thunderstorms that drift toward the Yucatan Peninsula. Red grouper excavate depressions in the sandy bottom, each fish maintaining a territory centered on these self-made homes. The bank acts as a massive fish nursery, juvenile species finding protection in its shallow waters before migrating to deeper seas. Hurricane waves sometimes expose parts of the bank, revealing fossil corals from when sea levels were different. Commercial fishing fleets work these waters, their catches supplying markets throughout Mexico. Beneath the bank lie salt domes, pillars of salt that rose through overlying rock like slow-motion bubbles. These formations trap oil and gas, creating the deposits that fuel Mexico's economy. Lake Catemaco in Veracruz fills an ancient volcanic crater where 3 endemic fish species evolved over 2 million years of isolation. The lake formed when lava flows sealed a volcanic depression, creating a bowl that filled with rainwater. These endemic fish, found nowhere else on Earth, adapted to the lake's specific chemistry and temperature regime. The lake reaches depths of 75 feet, deep enough to stratify into temperature layers that fish navigate seasonally. Local fishermen speak of underwater springs that create currents and temperature variations, knowledge passed through generations. The surrounding peaks trap clouds, ensuring abundant rainfall that maintains the lake level. Howler monkeys inhabit the forested crater rim, their morning calls echoing across the water. The lake has become famous for brujos, traditional healers who conduct ceremonies on its shores and islands. One island hosts a colony of macaques, descendants of animals brought for a university study, now thriving in this volcanic paradise. The water changes color with weather and season, deep blue under clear skies, gray-green before storms, sometimes almost black when algae bloom. Locals claim the lake has moods, its surface perfectly calm some days, mysteriously choppy on others with no wind. The Mapimi Desert contains endorheic basins where rainfall never reaches the ocean, creating closed systems where water evaporates into geometric patterns of salt and mineral deposits. These basins, called bolsones, collect water during rare storms, forming temporary lakes that might last days or months before evaporating. As water disappears, it leaves behind perfectly flat surfaces of dried mud that crack into polygons, natural tile work extending to the horizon. The minerals concentrate through repeated flooding and evaporation, creating soils toxic to most plants, but perfect for specially adapted halophytes. Some basins contain water only once per decade, their transformation from desert to lake so rare that each flooding becomes local legend. The salt formations take different forms, sometimes crystalline needles, other times smooth crusts that crunch underfoot. Mirages are common here, the flat surfaces and mineral deposits creating perfect conditions for light refraction. After rain, dormant shrimp eggs hatch in temporary pools, completing their life cycle in weeks before water disappears. The basins record climate history in their sediments, layers of different minerals indicating wetter and drier periods over millennia. Wind sculpts the dried surfaces, creating features that look like frozen waves in salt. Cerro de la Silla near Monterrey resembles a saddle at 5,971 feet, its distinctive M-shaped profile formed when limestone folded 35 million years ago during mountain building. The mountain consists of ancient seafloor, lifted thousands of feet above its origin, marine fossils embedded in rocks now touched by clouds. The folding created the saddle shape, two peaks with a depression between them that does indeed look like a giant saddle. The limestone weathers into sharp edges and vertical faces that challenge climbers while providing nesting sites for peregrine falcons. The mountain creates its own weather, forcing air upward to form clouds that cling to the peaks even on otherwise clear days. Caves riddle the limestone, some containing pre-Columbian artifacts suggesting ceremonial use. The mountain serves as Monterrey's symbol, its profile visible throughout the city, used for navigation like a natural compass. Desert plants grow on lower slopes while oak forests survive on northern faces where moisture lingers. The limestone continues dissolving, rain carving new features while erosion slowly lowers the peaks. At night, the mountain's pale limestone reflects moonlight, creating a ghostly presence above the glittering city. Temperature inversions sometimes fill the valley with smog, while the peaks rise above into clear air. The Yucatan Peninsula contains no surface rivers because rainwater immediately drains through porous limestone into underground streams that flow unseen toward the coast. This vast limestone platform, built from countless coral skeletons when this was seafloor, acts like a giant sponge. Rain falls, disappears within minutes into the rock, and continues its journey underground through caves and channels dissolved over millions of years. These hidden rivers emerge at the coast as fresh water springs in the ocean, sometimes visible as circles of different colored water where fresh meets salt. The Maya knew this hydrology, building cities near cenotes that provided access to the underground water system. The lack of surface water-shaped civilization here. Wars were fought over cenote access. Cities rose and fell based on drought cycles. Today, pollution entering the limestone at any point can emerge hundreds of miles away, the underground connections spreading contamination widely. The underground rivers maintain different temperatures and chemistry, some carrying dissolved minerals that precipitate when reaching the ocean. Cave divers have mapped portions of this system, finding rivers large enough to drive boats through if they weren't filled with water. The entire peninsula is essentially hollow, honeycombed with passages that make it seem solid ground floats on underground rivers. Veracruz Reef System includes 28 coral reefs growing on the remains of ancient reefs from when sea levels were 400 feet higher. These reefs form islands, barriers, and submerged platforms across 52,000 acres of protected area. The modern reefs grow atop their ancestors, millions of years of coral skeletons compressed into limestone platforms. Some reefs emerge at low tide, their surfaces carved into tide pools that host miniature ecosystems. Brain coral dominates many reefs, their convoluted surfaces resembling their namesake, some colonies centuries old. The reefs modify wave energy, protecting Veracruz from storms while creating calm lagoons where seagrass beds thrive. Parrotfish graze the reefs, their powerful beaks scraping algae from coral, the sound audible underwater like distant grinding. These fish excrete sand, each parrotfish producing hundreds of pounds annually, building beaches grain by grain. The reefs follow ancient fault lines, their positioning determined by geological structures invisible beneath living coral. Oil tankers navigate channels between reefs, their routes traced by Spanish galleons that sometimes missed the passages. Hurricane damage reveals reef structure, living coral on top, recently dead coral below, ancient limestone at the base, a timeline of growth and destruction. The Sierra de Juarez in Baja California captures Pacific moisture at 7,200 feet elevation, creating pine forests in the desert that survive on 20 inches of annual fog drip. These mountains intercept marine layer clouds that form over the cold California current, forcing them upward until moisture condenses on pine needles. The trees have adapted to harvest fog, their needles shaped to maximize water collection, drops channeling down branches to roots. This fog forest exists because of precise elevation. Too low and clouds pass overhead, too high and air becomes too dry. The forest floor remains damp even during droughts that kill desert plants below. Endemic species evolved here, isolated by surrounding desert, birds, mammals, and plants found nowhere else. The mountains create a biological island, temperate species surviving at tropical latitude through fog's gift of water. Indigenous Kumeyaay people knew these mountains as sources of materials unavailable in surrounding deserts. Pine nuts, medicinal plants, cooler summer refuges. Granite boulders worn smooth by wind shelter snow patches that might last into May. Anomalous white in the brown landscape. From these peaks, both Pacific and Gulf are visible, the peninsula's narrow width apparent. Cenote Nohoch stretches 42 miles as the world's second longest surveyed underwater cave, passages wide enough for 3 divers swimming abreast. The system connects multiple cenotes through tunnels decorated with formations that grew when sea levels were lower. Haloclines create visible layers where salt and freshwater meet, looking like underwater rivers flowing through caves. Some passages open into chambers large enough to hold buildings, their ceilings decorated with stalactites that took millions of years to form. Other sections squeeze through restrictions barely wide enough for a diver, connecting vast rooms like hallways in a flooded palace. The water clarity exceeds 200 feet visibility, making diving feel like flying through crystal air. Ancient Maya artifacts rest on ledges throughout the system. Pottery, jade, human remains from ceremonies performed when these caves were dry. The cave continues deeper than current exploration, passages leading into darkness that might connect to other systems. Different sections have distinct characteristics, some with white limestone walls, others stained orange by minerals, some floored with fine silt that billows if disturbed. Cave fish and crustaceans inhabit the darkness, blind species that navigate by sensing pressure waves from movement. Mexico spans 31 degrees of longitude, creating a 2-hour time difference between Tijuana and Cancun across the country's 1,964-mile width. This vast east-west extent means sunrise in Cancun occurs when Tijuana remains in darkness, the country experiencing multiple dawns. The width encompasses dramatically different oceans: the cold California current affecting the Pacific coast, the warm loop current influencing the Gulf. This longitude span creates diverse climates at the same latitude. Mazatlan and Tampico sit at the same parallel, but experience completely different weather patterns. The country operates on 4 time zones, though some states have opted out of daylight saving time, creating temporal confusion. The width allows Pacific hurricanes and Atlantic hurricanes to strike simultaneously, the country weathering storms from both oceans. Cultural differences follow the longitude. Pacific coastal peoples oriented toward Asia and the Americas' western coast. Gulf communities connected to the Caribbean and Atlantic world. The transcontinental railways and highways that cross this width pass through every possible landscape: desert, mountain, jungle, plateau. At the widest point, driving from coast to coast takes 3 days, crossing territories that feel like different countries. This width made Mexico a bridge for transcontinental trade long before the Panama Canal. The Chichinautzen lava field south of Mexico City formed just 1,500 years ago, so geologically recent that soil hasn't developed, and rainwater still percolates straight through the porous rock. This volcanic field created a barrier that blocked ancient drainage, contributing to the formation of the lakes where the Aztecs would build Tenochtitlan. The lava remains sharp and broken, called Malpais or Badland, nearly impossible to cross without paths. Plants grow directly from rock cracks, their roots following fractures to find moisture and nutrients. The recent formation means this landscape preserves details usually eroded: lava tubes, spatter cones, and flow patterns still clear. Archaeological evidence suggests people witnessed these eruptions, fleeing settlements that now lie beneath lava. The field continues to affect Mexico City's hydrology. Rain that falls here, emerging as springs that once fed the valley's lakes. Some lava tubes remain open, creating caves used by bats and temporary shelters for humans. Throughout history, the volcanic rock absorbs solar heat during the day, releasing it at night, creating microclimates that differ from surrounding areas. Despite the harsh conditions, life colonizes the lava rapidly: lichens first, then mosses, eventually larger plants, demonstrating nature's persistence. Banco Chinchorro Atoll lies 22 miles off Quintana Roo as the Northern Hemisphere's largest atoll. 300 square miles of coral reef, with 40 known shipwrecks on its reefs. This atoll formed on a subsiding submarine plateau, coral growth keeping pace with sinking to maintain position near the surface. The ring of coral encloses a lagoon 60 feet deep, protected waters where juvenile fish mature before venturing to open ocean. Ships have wrecked here for centuries: Maya trading canoes, Spanish galleons, modern freighters, their remains becoming part of the reef structure. Cannons encrusted with coral mark wreck sites, while more recent ships provide framework for new coral growth. The atoll's isolation creates exceptional water clarity and coral health, far enough from land to avoid runoff and pollution. Nurse sharks aggregate here in massive numbers, dozens resting together in sandy patches between coral heads. The 3 small cays on the reef support nesting seabirds and provide the only dry land for miles. Lobster fishermen build temporary camps on these islands during the season, their knowledge of the reef passed through generations. The atoll continues growing, coral adding perhaps an inch annually to structures already thousands of feet thick. The Valley of Cuatro Ciénegas hosts stromatolites that photosynthesize using methods unchanged for 3.5 billion years. The same process Earth's first organisms used when the atmosphere contained no free oxygen. These living rocks build slowly in desert pools, microscopic cyanobacteria adding layer upon layer of calcium carbonate, creating structures that look like stone mushrooms rising from crystal-clear water. Each stromatolite represents millions of generations of bacteria, their ancestors having survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and the rise of oxygen that killed most early life. The pools where they grow contain water chemistry, unlike anywhere else, extremely low phosphorus that would starve most organisms, yet these ancient life forms thrive. Scientists study them as windows into Earth's earliest biology, when life was learning to harvest sunlight. The stromatolites here use a form of photosynthesis that predates the version plants use, less efficient but perfectly suited to the mineral-poor waters. Some pools contain stromatolites over 6 feet tall, their growth rate so slow that these structures might be thousands of years old. The bacteria create their own microscopic weather, producing oxygen bubbles that rise through the water like natural champagne, each bubble containing the breath of Earth's most ancient life. Mexico's exclusive economic zone extends across 1.15 million square miles of ocean, an underwater territory 60% larger than the country's land area. This vast maritime domain reaches 200 nautical miles from shore, encompassing deep ocean trenches, underwater mountains, coral reefs, and abyssal plains. The zone includes parts of 4 major oceanic systems: the Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of California, each with distinct characteristics. In the Pacific, the zone covers depths exceeding 15,000 feet, where bizarre deep-sea creatures thrive in perpetual darkness. The Gulf Zone sits atop massive oil deposits, petroleum that powers the nation's economy. The Caribbean portion protects part of the Mesoamerican reef and its incredible biodiversity. Within these waters swim species from blue whales to vaquita porpoises, from great white sharks to tiny seahorses. The zone generates weather patterns that affect the entire country, hurricanes forming in its warm waters, currents carrying nutrients that support fisheries. Underwater mountains called seamounts rise thousands of feet from the ocean floor without breaking the surface, each one an isolated ecosystem. The economic zone represents Mexico's future, holding untapped resources, undiscovered species, and submarine landscapes as dramatic as any on land. The limestone platform of the Yucatan Peninsula continues 100 miles underwater into the Gulf of Mexico, revealing a hidden geography of drowned caves containing stalactites that formed when sea levels were 330 feet lower. These submerged caves prove the peninsula once extended far beyond its current shoreline, dry land where now fish swim through formations that grew in air. Divers exploring these underwater caves find evidence of the Ice Age world, passages decorated with formations that only develop above water, their presence proof of dramatically different sea levels. Some stalactites continue growing underwater, adapting to aquatic conditions, adding microscopic layers in ways that puzzle geologists. The submerged platform creates perfect conditions for coral growth, shallow enough for sunlight, but deep enough to avoid storm damage. Oil deposits beneath this platform formed from ancient reefs, compressed into petroleum over millions of years. The platform's edge drops suddenly into the deep gulf, creating upwellings that bring nutrients to surface waters. Submarine springs emerge from this underwater landscape, fresh water rising through limestone to create circles of different salinity visible from above. Fish aggregate around these springs, using them as navigation markers in the vast blue. The platform continues evolving, dissolving in some places, accumulating sediment in others. The Trans-Mexican volcanic belt created more than mountains. It divided the country biologically, separating northern desert species from southern tropical ones like a wall of fire and stone. This volcanic barrier determines where cacti stop and tree ferns begin, where rattlesnakes yield to fear-de-lances, where oak forests transition to cloud forests. The belt's elevation creates sky islands, peaks where temperate species survive surrounded by tropical lowlands, evolutionary experiments in isolation. Some volcanoes erupted recently enough that their lava remains bare and black, while others last erupted so long ago that their original shapes have eroded beyond recognition. The belt generates its own climate, forcing moisture-laden air upward to create rain shadows and cloud forests. Its volcanic soil, rich in minerals from Earth's interior, supports agriculture that feeds millions. Cities cluster along the belt despite volcanic risk because the flat valleys between peaks provide ideal settlement sites. The belt continues evolving, GPS measurements detecting millimeter-scale movements as magma shifts below. Each volcano tells a different story, some built gradually over millions of years, others born in human memory. The belt acts as a continental divide, determining whether rainfall flows to Pacific or Atlantic. Sierra Madre del Sur runs parallel to the Pacific coast, a mountain range that captures hurricane moisture and creates some of Mexico's wettest and driest places within miles of each other. These mountains rose from tectonic compression as the Cocos Plate dives beneath North America, crumpling the continental edge like a carpet pushed against a wall. The range's southern slopes receive over 200 inches of rain annually, supporting cloud forests where trees drip constantly. Cross to the northern slopes and rainfall drops to 20 inches, creating valleys where cacti grow in the rain shadow. The mountains contain minerals that color rivers, copper that turns water blue-green, iron that stains streams red. Indigenous Mixtec and Zapotec peoples built cities on mountaintops here, above the malaria zone, connected by trade routes that followed ridgelines. The range continues rising measurably, earthquakes adjusting its height as tectonic forces continue their slow collision. Coffee grows on the slopes at precise elevations, where temperature and moisture create perfect conditions. Clouds form against the mountains every afternoon as sea breezes carry moisture inland, creating predictable rainfall patterns. The highest peaks catch winter cold fronts, occasionally dusting tropical mountains with snow that melts within hours. The Lacandon rainforest represents North America's northernmost tropical rainforest, a fragment of jungle that once stretched from Mexico to South America. This forest survived ice ages in refugia, pockets of suitable climate where tropical species waited out global cooling. The forest contains more tree species in a single acre than exist in all of Canada, biodiversity compressed into remnant patches. Mahogany trees here grow for centuries, their canopies emerging above the forest like wooden skyscrapers. The forest floor remains so dark that many plants have evolved to parasitize others rather than photosynthesize. Howler monkeys serve as alarm clocks, their roars at dawn audible for 3 miles through the forest. Jaguars hunt tapirs along ancient paths worn by centuries of animal passage. The forest creates its own rainfall, trees releasing moisture that forms clouds that rain on the forest in a self-sustaining cycle. Archaeological sites throughout the forest reveal Maya cities reclaimed by jungle, pyramids becoming hills covered in trees. The forest continues shrinking, its edges converting to pasture, each year losing species that took millions of years to evolve. Yet the forest persists in protected areas, seed banks of biodiversity waiting to reclaim cleared land. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec represents North America's narrowest point, where just 137 miles separate the Pacific from the Gulf of Mexico. This narrow waist creates a wind tunnel where pressure differences between oceans generate the fierce Tehuano winds. When cold fronts push south from North America, they accelerate through this gap, reaching hurricane speeds without the spiral. These winds have shaped life here for millions of years. Trees grow bent permanently southward. Birds migrate around rather than through. Marine life depends on upwellings the winds create. Ancient civilizations recognize this strategic position, proposing canals here centuries before Panama. The isthmus divides Mexico culturally as well as physically. Western regions oriented toward the Pacific and Asia, eastern areas connected to the Atlantic world. The narrow land bridge concentrates transportation routes, railways and highways funneling through this bottleneck. During strong wind events, trucks overturn, roofs disappear, and the Pacific Ocean turns green from nutrients drawn up from depths. The winds create surfable waves hundreds of miles away, energy generated in this gap traveling across the Pacific. The isthmus continues to influence weather throughout Central America, steering hurricanes and determining rainfall patterns. Volcanic crater lakes dot central Mexico, perfectly circular pools filling depressions where eruptions once fountained lava skyward. These lakes often contain unique species that evolved in isolation, each crater lake a laboratory for evolution. Some lakes are acid from volcanic gases still seeping through crater floors, supporting only specialized bacteria. Others have neutralized over millennia, now hosting fish found nowhere else on Earth. The water in crater lakes stratifies into distinct layers. Warm surface water floating over cold depths that never mix, creating separate worlds in a single lake. Some craters hold multiple lakes at different elevations, connected by seasonal waterfalls. The indigenous peoples considered these lakes sacred, performing ceremonies on their shores, sometimes sacrificing valuable objects that archaeologists now recover from the depths. Water levels in crater lakes respond to volcanic activity, rising or falling as magma movement changes underground plumbing. Some lakes change color with the seasons as different algae bloom, shifting from blue to green to sometimes red. Birds use these lakes as stepping stones during migration, isolated water bodies providing rest stops in otherwise dry landscapes. The crater walls protect lakes from wind, creating mirror-perfect surfaces that reflect sky and clouds. The Balsas Depression represents one of Mexico's hottest and driest regions, a deep valley trapped between mountain ranges that block moisture from both oceans. This geological depression follows an ancient fault system, the land having dropped while surrounding mountains rose. Temperatures here regularly exceed 100 degrees, the heat trapped between mountain walls like an oven. The Balsas River provides the only reliable water, an oasis ribbon through otherwise parched landscape. Unique drought-adapted species evolved here. Cacti that store water for years, trees that photosynthesize through green bark when leaves drop. The depression served as a corridor for species movement between North and South America, a low-elevation route through otherwise impassable mountains. Archaeological evidence suggests this was one of the first places maize was domesticated, the wild ancestor still growing on these hills. The heat creates powerful thermals that raptors ride during migration, thousands of birds funneling through this corridor. During the rainy season, the depression briefly transforms, brown hills turning green for a few weeks before drought returns. The river carries enormous sediment loads from eroding mountains, gradually filling the depression over geological time. Underwater cenotes exist throughout the Caribbean seafloor off Quintana Roo, freshwater springs emerging from the ocean bottom where underground rivers reach the sea. These submarine springs create circles of different colored water, fresh water being less dense than salt, rising like underwater fountains. Fish gather at these springs, some species dependent on the reduced salinity, others attracted by nutrients the freshwater carries from inland. Ancient Maya knew these ocean springs, using them as freshwater sources during sea journeys, able to fill containers with drinking water miles from shore. The springs indicate the vast underground river system extends far beyond the current coastline, flowing through caves now drowned by rising seas. During hurricanes, these springs can reverse, salt water forcing its way inland through the same passages. Some springs emerge with such force they create boils on the ocean's surface, visible disturbances in otherwise calm seas. The temperature difference between spring water and seawater creates unique conditions, thermoclines visible as shimmering layers. Divers report the disorienting experience of swimming through fresh water while underwater, in the ocean, temporary rivers within the sea. The Mesa del Norte encompasses the northernmost Mexican plateau, a high desert where temperature extremes challenge life to adapt or perish. Winter temperatures plummet below freezing while summers exceed 100 degrees, a range that few organisms tolerate. This plateau exists because tectonic forces lifted ancient seafloor thousands of feet, evidenced by marine fossils and rocks now touched by snow. The elevation creates islands of pine forest surrounded by desert, sky islands where temperate species survive at tropical latitudes. Underground water emerges in springs that have flowed for millennia, creating oases where cottonwoods grow impossibly green against brown mountains. The plateau's flatness results from millions of years of erosion filling basins with sediment, creating vast plains between mountain ranges. Dust storms here can darken the sky for days, moving enough sediment to bury archaeological sites or expose new ones. Ancient lake beds dot the plateau, their salt flats glittering white in the sun, remnants of wetter times. Mining has extracted silver from these hills for 5 centuries, the geology that lifted the plateau also concentrating precious metals. The thin air at elevation means water boils at lower temperatures, trees grow slowly, and humans produce extra red blood cells. Coral spawning in Mexican Caribbean waters occurs on predictable nights, timed by moon phases and water temperature, when entire reefs simultaneously release billions of eggs and sperm. This synchronized reproduction, happening just a few nights each year, turns the water milky with life. The timing has evolved over millions of years. Too early and water's too cold, too late, and currents won't disperse offspring properly. Each coral species spawns at slightly different times during the night, preventing hybridization while maximizing fertilization success. Fish gather for the feast, gorging on protein-rich spawn, yet enough survives to perpetuate the reef. The spawning follows the August full moon typically, though researchers still don't fully understand the precise triggers. Divers describe swimming through underwater snowstorms, the spawn so thick visibility drops to inches. The fertilized eggs develop while drifting on currents, eventually settling to start new colonies far from parent reefs. This annual event connects reefs across the entire Caribbean, currents carrying Mexican spawn to distant islands. The spawning's success determines reef health for generations, a few nights deciding decades of growth. Sacred cenotes served Maya civilization as portals to the underworld, places where the boundary between earthly and divine dissolved. These particular cenotes received offerings for over 1,000 years: jade, gold, pottery, and human sacrifices preserved in the cool water. The objects tell stories of drought and plenty, warfare and peace, the offerings changing with circumstances. Skulls, recovered from sacred cenotes, show evidence of ritual preparation, marks indicating ceremonial treatment before sacrifice. The Maya chose specific cenotes as sacred based on characteristics, depth, water color, acoustic properties, or mythological associations. Some cenotes connect through flooded caves to other sacred sites, creating underground pilgrimage routes. The water in sacred cenotes often contains higher mineral content, creating unusual colors that reinforced their supernatural status. Modern Maya still perform ceremonies at some cenotes, continuing traditions that predate written history. Archaeological work in sacred cenotes requires extreme care, the water containing layers of offerings that document centuries of religious practice. The cenotes preserve organic materials normally lost to decomposition, wooden objects and textiles surviving millennia underwater. The Sierra Madre Oriental creates one of Earth's most dramatic rain shadows, its eastern slopes receiving 80 inches of rain annually, while western slopes just miles away struggle with 15 inches. This moisture gradient happens because Gulf winds hit the mountain wall and rise, cooling and dropping their water on the ascent. By the time air crosses the peaks, it's wrung dry, descending the western slopes as warm, desiccating wind. The rain shadow creates the Chihuahuan Desert, North America's largest desert, existing because these mountains steal moisture from Gulf winds. Cloud forests cling to the middle elevations on eastern slopes, perpetually shrouded in mist, while western slopes at the same elevation support cacti and thorny shrubs. The mountains channel hurricanes northward along the coast, protecting the interior while devastating the coastal plain. Limestone composing these mountains dissolves in the abundant eastern rainfall, creating some of the world's deepest caves. Rivers on the eastern slopes run year-round, while western streams flow only after rare storms. The rain shadow influences agriculture, economy, and culture. Eastern communities growing tropical crops, while western ones raise drought-resistant livestock. This invisible wall of dryness extends hundreds of miles inland. The submarine canyon off Cabo San Lucas plunges to depths exceeding 10,000 feet just miles from shore, an underwater Grand Canyon hidden beneath Pacific swells. This canyon formed along transform faults where the Pacific plate slides past the North American plate, tectonic forces creating a gash in the ocean floor. The canyon walls host deep-sea creatures usually found far from land, bioluminescent jellies, giant squid, six-gill sharks from the abyss. Underwater avalanches periodically thunder down the canyon walls, moving millions of tons of sediment toward the deep ocean. The canyon focuses internal waves, deep currents that bring nutrients from the depths, supporting the marine abundance that makes Cabo famous for fishing. Gray whales use the canyon during migration, its depth providing protection from orcas. The canyon continues growing, earthquakes triggering landslides that deepen and widen the chasm. Submarine rivers of sediment flow down the canyon bottom, denser than surrounding water, carving channels within channels. Scientists have detected mysterious sounds from the canyon depths, biological or geological, their source unknown. The canyon affects surface waves, deep water suddenly appearing near shore, creating dangerous conditions. The Tres Virgenes volcanic complex in Baja California Sur shows how volcanism evolves through time, 3 peaks representing different stages of volcanic life. La Virgen oldest and most eroded, El Azufre middle-aged and dormant, El Viejo youngest and still releasing steam from fumaroles. This progression happened as the Baja Peninsula moved northwest, passing over a stationary hotspot that created each volcano in turn. The volcanic heat powers geothermal energy plants, steam from Earth's interior generating electricity for desert communities. Hot springs emerge around the volcanoes, their mineral-rich waters creating terraced pools decorated with colorful bacterial mats. The volcanic soil supports unexpected agriculture, date palms and citrus growing in the desert, where volcanic minerals enrich otherwise barren ground. Obsidian from these volcanoes spread throughout ancient Baja, the volcanic glass prized for toolmaking. The volcanoes create their own weather, their dark rock-heating air that rises to form afternoon clouds. Caves in the volcanic rock shelter rare bat species, the constant temperature providing perfect roost sites. The complex demonstrates plate tectonics in action, the Earth's crust conveyor belting over deeper heat sources. Mexico's geography pulses with hidden life, from stromatolites breathing oxygen in desert pools to caves that exhale the Earth's ancient breath. Mountains that were once seafloor now wear clouds as crowns, while underground rivers flow through darkness toward light. This land exists in constant conversation between elements: water carving stone, fire building mountains, wind sculpting sand, time transforming everything. The country spans from tropical coral reefs to alpine glaciers, from the world's deepest caves to peaks that scrape the sky. In every limestone passage, volcanic crater, and desert spring, Mexico reveals Earth's patient artistry, its talent for creating wonder from simple ingredients of rock, water, and time. And so we've traveled through Mexico's hidden geography tonight, from crystals growing in impossible heat to underwater rivers flowing through darkness, from deserts that sing to lakes that vanish with the seasons. We've seen how this land exists in constant conversation between fire and water, between the patience of limestone and the urgency of lava, between what the ocean gives and what the desert takes away. Mexico's geography reminds us that Earth writes its stories slowly, in languages of stone and salt, wind, and time. Every cenote is a window into underground worlds, every volcano a punctuation mark in geological sentences millions of years long. The land here doesn't just exist. It remembers, it transforms, it dreams in scales of time we can barely imagine. We've witnessed peninsulas pulling away at fingernail speed, caves breathing with the rhythm of centuries, reefs building their limestone cities one polyp at a time. We've seen how mountains determine where rain falls, how underground rivers connect what seems separate, how the marriage of tectonic plates creates both catastrophe and paradise. In these 100 glimpses of Mexican geography, perhaps you felt the same quiet wonder that comes from understanding our planet's patient architecture. The stromatolites still photosynthesize as they did before oxygen filled our skies. The crystals in Nika continue growing in their furnace chambers. Tomorrow, the swifts will spiral from Sótano de las Golondrinas, as they have for millennia, and somewhere, a new grain of sand will join a beach that's been building since before humans walked the earth. Thank you for drifting with us through these midnight landscapes. May your dreams tonight be filled with turquoise waters and singing sands, with crystals growing in darkness and mountains touching clouds. May you rest knowing that while you sleep, Mexico's geography continues its slow dance, rivers carving, volcanoes building, caves breathing in the darkness. Until we meet again in the quiet hours, this is Midnight Geography, wishing you peaceful sleep and dreams as deep as cenotes, as calm as crater lakes at dawn.